In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
The Spirit of Fire's cryo-bay was a tomb of ice and silence. Frost-rimed pods lined the walls, their occupants suspended in the eternal moment between sleep and death. Most were dark, their systems long since failed, their occupants lost to time's inevitable entropy. But 17 pods still glowed with faint amber light, life support barely clinging to functionality after decades, no, centuries, of operation far beyond their design specifications. Master Chief stood beside one pod, watching as UNSC medical teams prepared to begin the revival sequence. Through the frost-clouded viewport, he could see the face of the occupant. Captain James Gregory Cutter, commander of the Spirit of Fire, a man who had sacrificed his ship's slip-space drive to save a solar system and condemned his crew to an endless drift through the void. Neural activity is stable, Dr. Chen reported, her scanner displaying brainwave patterns that showed no signs of cryo damage. Cardiovascular system is weak but functional. He should survive the revival, though he'll need extensive rehabilitation. "Begin the sequence," Chief ordered. The pod hissed as warming agents flooded its interior. Cutter's face twitched, muscles responding to stimulation after impossibly long dormancy. His eyes moved beneath closed lids. And then, with a gasp that was half breath and half sob, they opened. Confusion, disorientation, the primal fear of waking in an unknown place. Cutter's gaze darted around the medical bay, taking in the faces of strangers in unfamiliar uniforms, the advanced medical equipment that looked nothing like what he remembered, and finally settling on the imposing figure in green Mjolnir armor standing at his bedside. "Easy, Captain," Chief said, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who'd overseen countless medical emergencies. "You're safe. You're aboard the UNSC Infinity. You've been recovered." Cutter's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment before his voice returned, raw and uncertain. Infinity. That was still in planning when we... He stopped, memory flooding back. The Ark. We destroyed the Forerunner facility. Shaw made the call to jettison the slipspace drive. We were adrift. How long? His eyes found Chief's visor with desperate intensity. How long has it been? The question hung in the sterile air like a guillotine blade. Chief had faced down Covenant fleets, stared into the maw of the flood, confronted the didact himself. But telling this man, this good man who'd made the ultimate sacrifice for humanity, that his sacrifice had been for nothing, that was harder than any battle. "Captain Cutter?" A new voice interrupted. Captain Lasky entered the medical bay, his dress uniform crisp despite the exhaustion etched into his features. "I'm Captain Thomas Lasky. I command the Infinity, and I'm afraid the answer to your question is complicated." Over the next hour, as medical teams revived the other 16 survivors from the Spirit of Fire, including Professor Ellen Anders and Spartan Jerome 092, Lasky and Chief told Cutter everything. The end of the Human Covenant War, the discovery of new Forerunner threats, the Infinity's construction and deployment, and then the impossible truth, the catastrophic slipspace failure that had thrown them not just across space, but across time itself, 38,000 years into humanity's future. Cutter listened in silence, his weathered face growing progressively more ashen. When Lasky described the Imperium, the servitors, the religious fanaticism, the grinding brutality of eternal war, Cutter's hands clenched into fists. When he learned about Roland's sacrifice, about the battles against orcs and chaos, about the narrow escape from both Imperial and Tau control, His jaw tightened. "So, Earth," Cutter said finally, his voice hollow. "The UNSC, everything we've fought for, is gone," Lasky confirmed gently. "The Earth that exists now is called Terra. It's the throne world of a tyrannical theocracy that would lobotomize you for questioning their god emperor. The UNSC is extinct. We're the last remnant. 17,000 souls aboard the Infinity, plus the few hundred we've recovered from your ship. That's all that's left of the United Nations Space Command." Cutter looked down at his hands that had commanded fleets, signed deployment orders, sent good people to die for a cause he believed in. Then what was it all for? Every battle, every sacrifice. Did any of it matter? "Yes," Master Chief said with absolute certainty. The word cut through Cutter's despair like a blade. "Every Marine who died under your command, every civilian you saved at the Ark, they mattered. They lived as free people in a free society. They never knew servitude. They never knew the darkness of this millennium. That's worth something. That's worth everything." Cutter looked up at the Spartan, seeing something in that faceless helm that he recognized. The weight of command, the burden of impossible choices, the determination to keep fighting even when victory seemed meaningless. "What now?" Cutter asked. "Where do we go from here?" "We survive," Lasky replied. "We've established a foothold here in the Ghoul Stars, a region the major powers avoid. We're building something new, not the UNSC as it was, but something that remembers what it stood for. A place where people aren't resources to be expended, where AI aren't demons, where humanity means something more than just survival." "A tall order in a galaxy like this," Cutter observed. "The tallest," Lasky agreed. "But we're not alone anymore. Your ship, your crew, you've survived worse than we have. You've been fighting this war longer than anyone. We need that experience. We need your knowledge and..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "We need you to know that your sacrifice at the Ark wasn't wasted. The UNSC you fought for is dead, but its spirit isn't. Not while we're still here." Cutter was silent for a long moment, processing a loss so vast it defied comprehension. Then, slowly, he sat up straighter, the posture of a commanding officer reasserting itself through the shock and grief. "Then let's get to work," he said. "What's our tactical situation?" The senior staff briefing room was crowded. Around the table sat two ship captains, a Spartan 2, a Spartan 4 commander, newly revived Spartan Jerome 092, Professor Anders, and various department heads. The holographic display at the center showed their current position, a dimly lit region of space marked on ancient Imperial charts as the Ghoul Stars, Terra Incognita. "We're here," Commander Bradley indicated a blinking marker. "Approximately 6,000 light-years from the nearest Imperial system, 8,000 from Tau space. The region is considered cursed by Imperial superstition and simply unprofitable by Tau pragmatism, which makes it perfect for us." He expanded the display, showing 15 nearby star systems. Initial surveys show 3 systems with habitable worlds, 2 with asteroid belts rich in rare minerals, and 1 with a gas giant perfect for fuel harvesting. But there's a problem. The display shifted, highlighting strange energy signatures emanating from several of the systems. "We're detecting active technology. Old technology. The energy signatures match nothing in UNSC or Covenant databases, but they're consistent with Forerunner era readings. Except..." He paused. "Except the Forerunners are extinct. Have been for 100,000 years." "Not Forerunner," Professor Anders interjected, her brilliant mind already racing ahead despite the exhaustion of cryo-recovery. She pulled up comparative analyses. The mathematical signatures are similar, but fundamentally different. Forerunner technology operated on the principle of neural physics, thought given form. These readings show something else. Quantum phase shifting, living metal, necrodermis. English, Professor, Palmer requested. The Necrons, Anders stated. According to the Imperial data cores we've accessed, the Necrons are a race of ancient machines. They were organic once, millions of years ago, but transferred their consciousness into mechanical bodies to achieve immortality. They fought a war against the Old Ones, beings of immense power, and won, then went into hibernation to wait out the galaxy's cooling. Now they're waking up, and we've apparently set up shop in their backyard. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. How dangerous are they? Cutter asked, his tactical mind immediately assessing the threat. According to Imperial records, a single Necron warrior is nearly indestructible, Chief replied, having reviewed the available intelligence. They're armed with weapons that strip matter molecule by molecule. They can teleport, and when killed, they phase out and reassemble at a central recovery point. You have to completely disintegrate them to ensure they don't come back. An entire tomb world awakening could field millions of them. And we're sitting in a region with multiple tomb worlds, Palmer summarized grimly. Outstanding. We escaped the Imperium and the Tau just to wake up an army of unkillable robot zombies. We don't know they're hostile, Lasky cautioned. Maybe we can avoid them. This region is vast. There's room for both of us. Captain, Anders said gently, pulling up historical data. Every single recorded encounter between the Imperium and the Necrons has ended in war. The Necrons view organic life as insects, infestations on worlds they consider their rightful territory. They don't negotiate. They exterminate. Before Lasky could respond, an alert chimed. The sensor officer's face appeared on a secondary screen, her expression tense. Captain, we're detecting an inbound contact. Single vessel. It just appeared. No slip space signature, no warp transition. It was just suddenly there, 15,000 kilometers out. Bradley pulled up the sensor feed. What they saw was a ship unlike anything in UNSC records. It was a crescent of dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Green energy pulsed along its surface in hypnotic patterns, and it was accelerating toward them with purpose. Battle stations, Lasky ordered, the decision reflexive. All hands to combat positions. Launch alert fighters. Someone get me a tactical analysis of that vessel. Captain? The sensor officer's voice carried a new edge of fear. The vessel is charging weapons. Multiple energy signatures. They're targeting the Infinity and the Spirit of Fire. Cutter met Lasky's eyes across the table. Two captains from different eras, united by a single grim realization. The Ghoul's stars had not been empty. They had been waiting. Here we go again, Cutter said quietly. Master Chief checked his assault rifle's magazine and nodded to Spartan Jerome, who did the same. Two super soldiers from different generations, about to face an enemy that had ended civilizations when humanity was still learning to make fire. The Necrons had awakened, and they were not pleased to find their territory infested with organic life. The Necron vessel drifted closer with the inexorable patience of a predator that knew its prey had nowhere to run. On the Infinity's bridge, every screen showed a different nightmare. Energy signatures that defied conventional physics. Hull materials that registered as both solid matter and quantum probability waves, and weapon systems that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "That ship is 3 kilometers long," Bradley reported, his voice tight with professional control masking genuine fear. "But it's reading mass signatures equivalent to a vessel 10 times that size. The density is..." "Captain, their hull is denser than a neutron star's core. Our weapons might not even scratch it." "We won't know until we try," Lasky replied. "Weapons target their power distribution nodes. If we can disrupt their energy flow..." "Captain, they're hailing us," the communications officer interrupted, surprise evident in her voice. "Audio only. The signal is... it's not radio. It's some kind of quantum entanglement carrier wave. And the language..." She paused, fingers flying over her console. "Sir, they're speaking High Gothic, Imperial language. They know we can understand them." "Put it through," Lasky ordered. What emerged from the speakers was not a voice. It was the auditory equivalent of ancient machinery grinding against itself, overlaid with mathematical harmonics that made human ears ache. The translation software struggled, producing words that felt more like concepts forced into linguistic form. "Attention! Biological entities. You have violated sovereign territory of the Sautek dynasty. Your presence constitutes trespass upon worlds claimed by divine right of the Infinite Empire. You will provide justification for your existence or be classified as vermin requiring extermination." The message carried no emotion, no inflection. It was a statement of fact delivered with the cold certainty of mathematical law. Lasky looked at his senior staff. Cutter gave a small nod. He'd faced impossible diplomatic situations before. "Open a channel," Lasky said. "Let's try talking before shooting." "Channel open, sir. This is Captain Thomas Lasky of the United Nations Space Command vessel Infinity. We were not aware this region was claimed territory. We are refugees displaced by spatial anomaly, seeking only to establish a peaceful settlement. We mean no offense and request permission to coexist peacefully." The response was immediate and inflectionless. "Analysis. United Nations Space Command, designation unknown. Technological signatures indicate post-Dark Age human origin. Genetic markers suggest Terran baseline with minor augmentation. Assessment. You are standard biological infestation. Diplomatic protocols are not applicable to vermin. Extermination will commence in 300 seconds. Use this time for final contemplation of your insignificant existence." "They just called us vermin," Palmer said, her voice flat with anger, "after we asked nicely." "They're machines," Professor Anders interjected, studying the Necron ship's energy patterns on her datapad. "Or rather, their organic consciousness transferred into machine bodies. They've been alive for millions of years. To them, we're not peers. We're mayflies, barely worth acknowledging before swatting." "Well, this mayfly has teeth," Lasky said grimly. "All ships, battle stations, coordinate fire with the spirit of fire. Target their weapon emplacements. If they want extermination, they're going to have to work for it." The countdown reached 0. The Necron vessel opened fire with weapons that violated every principle of conventional warfare. Gauss flares, electromagnetic beams that didn't just damage matter but unraveled it at the molecular level, lanced across the void. They struck the Infinity's forward shields, and for a moment, the shields held. Then they began to fail, not through overload, but through disintegration. The energy barrier itself was being erased from existence. "Shields down to 40%, Bradley shouted. They're not penetrating our shields. They're deleting them. Return fire, all weapons. The Infinity's Mac cannons spoke, sending 3 600-ton slugs at relativistic velocities toward the Necron ship. The slugs hit with kinetic force that should have shattered continents. They struck the Necron hull and stopped. Simply stopped, embedded in the living metal, their kinetic energy absorbed and neutralized by quantum phase shifting. Then the hull rippled like liquid mercury, and the slugs were expelled, falling away harmlessly. Direct hits, 0 damage, Bradley reported, disbelief creeping into his professional tone. Captain, our primary weapons are ineffective. Spirit of Fire, this is Infinity, Lasky called out. Captain Cutter, do you copy? Cutter's voice came through, steady despite the circumstances. We copy. Infinity. Our Mac rounds aren't doing anything either. Trying missiles now. The Spirit of Fire, older and less powerful than the Infinity, but crewed by veterans who'd survived impossible odds before, launched a full spread of Archer missiles. Hundreds of warheads streaked toward the Necron vessel, their targeting systems locked on multiple points across the alien hull. The Necron ship didn't bother with point defense. It simply phased, its entire structure shifting slightly out of normal space-time. The missiles passed through it as if it weren't there, detonating uselessly in empty void beyond. They can become intangible, Anders breathed, her scientific fascination momentarily overwhelming her fear. They're shifting between dimensions. That's beyond even Forerunner capabilities. Fascinating, Palmer said dryly. How do we kill something that's not entirely in our dimension? The Necron vessel resumed firing. This time, the Gauss beams found their mark. They struck the Infinity's hull directly, and Chief watched in horror as a 10-meter section of armor plating simply ceased to exist, unraveled molecule by molecule. Atmosphere vented. Alarms screamed. 17 crew members in that section died instantly, their bodies disintegrated before they could even scream. Hull breach, Deck 9, Damage Control reported, sealing emergency bulkheads. We can't fight this, Bradley said, the tactical officer's assessment brutally honest. We're completely outmatched. We need to run. Agreed, Lasky said, hating the words but recognizing the truth. Helm, full reverse thrust. Get us out of their weapon range. Cutter, disengage and follow us. We're withdrawing. Negative, Infinity. Cutter's voice carried a new edge. We've got a better idea. Professor Anders, you're up. On the Spirit of Fire, Anders was hunched over a sensor console, her mind working at the same brilliant pace that had once decoded Forerunner technology. The Necrons phase shift to avoid damage, she said rapidly. But they have to be solid to fire their weapons. There's a pattern, a rhythm. 0.003 seconds of solidity while charging, another 0.003 during discharge. If we can time our shots to that exact window, we can hit them, Cutter finished. Infinity, transmit your firing solution data to us. We'll coordinate. On my mark, both ships fire simultaneously at the exact moment their weapon systems go solid. That's a ridiculous margin of error, Bradley protested. We'd need perfect synchronization. Then it's a good thing we have Spartans, Chief said. He was already moving. Palmer, Jerome, get to the weapons control centers. Manual targeting, augmented reaction time should give us the edge we need. The 3 Spartans sprinted from the bridge, their enhanced physiology making them a blur to normal crew members. Chief reached Mac Battery 1 in under a minute, ripped the safety panel off the manual controls, and jacked his armor's interface directly into the firing computer. Through his neural link, he could feel the massive cannon's charge building. His HUD displayed the Necron ship's firing pattern, extrapolated by Anders's analysis. The window was impossibly small. A normal human couldn't time it. But Spartans weren't normal humans. All batteries. Cutter's voice came through the fleet-wide channel. Synchronize on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. Chief's finger tightened on the trigger at the exact nanosecond the Necron Gauss cannon entered its charging cycle. Palmer and Jerome did the same from their positions. The Spirit of Fire's remaining Mac cannon fired simultaneously. 4 hypervelocity slugs struck the Necron vessel while it was solid. This time, there was no phase shift. The slugs punched through the living metal hull, tearing massive gouges through the alien ship's structure. Secondary explosions bloomed. If explosions was the right word for the way the Necron systems catastrophically failed. Green energy cascading through the breaches like toxic lightning. The Necron ship shuddered, listing to one side. But it didn't die. Instead, it began to transform. Sections of the hull folded in on themselves, revealing internal structures that seemed to exist in geometries that shouldn't have been possible in three-dimensional space. And from launch bays that hadn't been visible before, smaller craft began to emerge. Dozens of them. Hundreds. "They're launching boarding parties," Bradley reported, his voice climbing toward panic. "No, wait, those aren't boarding craft. They're fighters. No, they're scarabs," Anders identified, pulling up matching imagery from Imperial records. Necron tomb blades. Single-pilot fighters equipped with the same Gauss technology as the capital ship, and her face went pale. "And they're launching Canoptech constructs. Repair drones. They're not attacking. They're buying time to repair the damage we did." The swarm of Necron constructs spread out, some forming a protective screen around their damaged mothership, others accelerating toward the UNSC vessels with clear, hostile intent. "Launch all fighters," Lasky ordered. "Longswords, engage those tomb blades. Point defense batteries, take out the repair drones before they can fix that ship. We hurt them, now we finish them." The space between the vessels became a maelstrom of violence. Longsword fighters, piloted by the best of the UNSC's aviators, tangled with tomb blades that moved with impossible precision. Gauss beams intersected with missile contrails. Point defense lasers traced geometric patterns of death against the stars. But the Necrons had one advantage the UNSC didn't. They didn't care about casualties. Every tomb blade that was destroyed simply phased out at the moment of death, its pilot downloading into a resurrection matrix aboard the mothership. The longsword pilots who were hit by Gauss fire didn't get that luxury. They simply ceased to exist, their fighters tumbling as dead metal husks. "We're losing pilots faster than they are," Palmer reported from the weapons deck. "This is a war of attrition we can't win." Chief watched the tactical display, his enhanced mind processing the patterns. The Necrons were machines. They were logical. They were following predictable protocols, which meant they could be anticipated. "Captain," Chief said over the command channel, "I need a Pelican and 3 other Spartans. We're going to board that ship." "Chief, that's suicide," Lasky replied immediately. "You saw what their weapons do." "I saw what their weapons do to hulls and shields," Chief corrected. "I haven't seen what they do to a Spartan in Mjolnir armor moving at combat speed. We get aboard, we find their ship's reactor or control center, and we detonate a Havoc nuke. Take out the mothership, and those fighters lose their resurrection point. We end this." There was a long pause. Then Cutter's voice joined the channel. "I've seen Chief pull off impossible boarding actions before. Against worse odds. Let him try." Lasky closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of command, the same weight Cutter had carried for decades. "Chief, you're cleared for the mission. But if you see a way out, you take it. That's an order." "Understood, sir," Chief replied, already moving toward the hangar bay. Over the tactical net, he called out, "Palmer, Jerome, Buck, you're with me. We're going hunting." As the 4 Spartans raced toward their Pelican, Chief looked out a viewport at the Necron vessel. It hung in the void like a shard of midnight given form, ancient and terrible and utterly indifferent to the suffering of organic life. The Forerunners had been gods. The Covenant had been zealots. The Flood had been a force of nature. But the Necrons were something else. They were the inevitable end of technological evolution, without mercy, without compassion, without anything resembling humanity. And Master Chief was about to board their ship and teach them that even ancient, immortal machines could learn fear. Assuming he survived the next hour. The Pelican designated Shadow 6 screamed through the void. Its stealth systems pushed to maximum as it weaved between Gauss beams and the tumbling wreckage of destroyed longswords. Inside, 4 Spartans stood in the troop bay, mag-locked to the deck. Weapons checked and rechecked with the methodical precision of soldiers who knew they were about to walk into hell. Master Chief checked his MA-5D assault rifle one last time, then looked at his team. Commander Palmer, her armor scarred from a dozen battles in the 41st millennium. Spartan Jerome 090, a relic from the Spirit of Fire who'd fought Covenant, Flood, and banished across decades. And Edward Buck, the veteran ODST-turned-Spartan who'd seen enough impossible situations to know when to crack jokes and when to stay silent. This was a stay silent moment. "Approach vector nominal," the pilot reported, her voice tight with concentration. "But we've got a problem. The Necron ship is phasing randomly, not the whole vessel, just sections of the hull. I can't guarantee a stable insertion point." "Get us as close as you can," Chief ordered. "We'll use jump packs if we have to." Through the Pelican's viewport, the Necron vessel grew larger, filling their view with its impossible geometry. Up close, it was even more disturbing. The hull seemed to move in ways that defied three-dimensional space. Sections folding through angles that shouldn't exist, surfaces reflecting light that came from directions with no visible source. 30 seconds to drop zone, the pilot announced. "Good luck, Spartans. Try not to wake up anything worse than what's already shooting at us." The Pelican's rear ramp dropped, and the 4 Spartans leaped into the void. For 5 seconds, they were falling, not down, but across, their jump packs firing precise bursts to adjust their trajectory toward the Necron hull. Chief watched his rangefinder count down. 200 meters, 150, 100. The hull's surface seemed to ripple as they approached, like water disturbed by rain. They hit hard, magnetic boots engaging on impact. The hull was cold. Not the cold of vacuum, but something deeper. A cold that seemed to leach heat through armor plating. Chief's motion tracker showed the other 3 Spartans landing in formation around him. "Breach point, 10 meters north," Jerome reported, indicating a section where the Mac round had torn through the hull. Still venting. Something. Not atmosphere. Some kind of energy discharge. They moved to the breach. Weapons raised. The interior of the ship was visible through the gap, a corridor of black metal lined with geometric patterns that pulsed with sickly green light. And standing in that corridor, as if waiting for them, were 4 Necron warriors. They were humanoid, barely. Each stood 2 meters tall, skeletal frames of living metal wrapped in tattered ceremonial cloths that somehow survived in vacuum. Their eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowed with the same green energy that pulsed through the ship. In their hands, they carried Gauss flares, the barrels already beginning to charge. "Contact!" Palmer called, opening fire. Her assault rifle barked, rounds striking the nearest Necron in the chest. The bullets hit, punched through the living metal, sent the warrior staggering backward. Green ichor sprayed from the wounds, some kind of energy bleed. But the Necron didn't fall. Instead, it straightened, the wounds in its chest closing as the living metal flowed like liquid to repair the damage. "They're regenerating," Buck shouted, switching to armor-piercing rounds. "How do we kill something that repairs itself?" "Overwhelming damage," Chief replied, pulling a plasma grenade from his belt. "All at once. Concentrated fire." The 4 Spartans focused on a single Necron, their combined fire tearing into the machine warrior with devastating efficiency. Assault rifle rounds, armor-piercing rounds, and plasma grenades struck simultaneously. The Necron warrior's torso exploded, living metal unable to regenerate fast enough. Its head toppled, its limbs scattered. And then, in a flash of green light, it phased out entirely, teleporting away. "It's not dead," Jerome observed. "It retreated to repair." "Then we don't give them time to repair," Chief said, leaping through the breach into the Necron ship. "Move fast, hit hard, find the reactor." The interior of the Necron vessel was a nightmare of alien architecture. Corridors stretched in directions that made the Spartans' eyes hurt to follow. Gravity was inconsistent. Vertical surfaces became horizontal without warning. And the green light that pulsed through everything seemed to whisper at the edge of hearing, mathematical harmonics that bypassed ears and resonated directly in bone. "Chief," Buck said, his voice strained. "Is it just me? Or is this place messing with your head?" "Ignore it," Chief ordered. Though he felt it too, a pressure building behind his eyes. His HUD occasionally flickering with data corruption. The ship itself is a weapon. It's designed to drive organic minds to madness. Focus on the mission. They moved deeper into the ship, following energy signatures that Professor Anders had identified as the power distribution network. Behind them, more Necron warriors materialized, not emerging from doors or corridors, but simply phasing into existence from nowhere. The Spartans fought a running battle, their superior mobility and tactical coordination the only things keeping them alive. Gauss beams seared past, close enough that Chief felt his shields flare and fail. Palmer took a glancing hit to her shoulder plate. The armor didn't explode or melt. It simply ceased to exist, leaving exposed undersuit. She kept fighting, rotating to protect her damaged side. "There." Jerome pointed ahead, where a massive chamber opened up. At its center was a construct that defied description, a sphere of what looked like captured starlight, held in place by pillars of living metal that phased in and out of reality. Energy arced between the sphere and the pillars in patterns that hurt to look at. "That's the reactor," Chief said. "Plant the nuke at the base of those pillars. 30-second fuse. We move fast." Buck was already pulling the Havoc tactical nuke from his equipment pack, a compact device no larger than a backpack, but capable of a 5-kiloton yield. He sprinted toward the nearest pillar, the other Spartans providing covering fire against the Necron warriors that continued to phase into the chamber. That's when the ship's defense system truly activated. The walls themselves began to move. Scarab-like constructs. Canoptek spiders, according to Imperial designations, emerged from panels that hadn't been visible before. Each was the size of a warthog, their limbs tipped with particle beamers and fabricator arrays that could repair damage or dismantle intruders at the molecular level. "We've got company," Palmer shouted, switching to her M60 Magnum to target the spider's optical sensors. Big, mechanical, spider-like company. Jerome moved with the practiced efficiency of a soldier who'd fought for decades, his combat knife, a massive blade designed for Spartan strength, finding weak points in Necron joints. He severed a warrior's leg at the knee, then crushed its skull under his armored boot before it could regenerate. "Bomb is planted," Buck called out. "Timer is set. We have 30 seconds to get clear." "Extraction point, back the way we came," Chief ordered. "Double time." They ran. Behind them, more Necron warriors phased in, and the Canoptech spiders gave chase, their particle beamers carving molten trails through the walls. Chief's motion tracker was a chaos of red icons, hostiles closing from all directions. 20 seconds. They reached a junction where the corridor split 3 ways. Chief's tactical display showed the route back to their breach point blocked by massing Necron forces. "Alternate route," Jerome called, pointing down a side passage that showed fewer contacts. 15 seconds. The passage opened onto a chamber that made all of them stop for a fatal instant. It was vast, stretching hundreds of meters, and filled with alcoves. In each alcove stood a Necron warrior, completely still, their eyes dark. Thousands of them, an entire legion, dormant, waiting. "Don't touch anything," Palmer whispered. "Don't wake them up." They moved through the silent army, their footsteps echoing despite the vacuum. Chief's HUD countdown continued its inexorable march. 10 seconds. They were halfway through the chamber when one of the Canoptech spiders pursuing them burst through the entrance. Its particle beamer fired wildly, striking one of the dormant warriors. The warrior's eyes flickered to life. Then the next one, and the next. Like a wave, green light spread through the chamber as thousands of Necron warriors awakened simultaneously. 5 seconds. "Run!" Chief shouted, all stealth abandoned. The Spartans sprinted, their enhanced physiology pushed to its absolute limit. Behind them, the army of the dead stirred, mechanical limbs beginning to move with inexorable purpose. 2 seconds. They reached the breach point, then leapt into the void just as the tactical nuke detonated. The explosion ripped through the Necron ship's reactor chamber, and for a brief moment, a miniature star blazed inside the alien vessel. The living metal hull, capable of withstanding weapons fire that could crack planets, couldn't contain a nuclear detonation at its heart. The ship came apart, not in a single explosion, but in a cascading series of phase collapses as sections of the hull shifted out of sync with reality and tore themselves to pieces. Chief's jump pack fired, propelling him away from the dying ship. He watched on his external cameras as the Necron vessel, this fragment of an empire millions of years old, became an expanding sphere of shrapnel and green fire. "Shadow 6, this is Sierra 117, Chief transmitted. "Package delivered. Requesting immediate pickup." "Copy that, Chief," the Pelican pilot responded, the relief in her voice evident. "On approach now. Welcome back to the land of the living." As the Pelican's bay door opened and the 4 Spartans were pulled aboard, Chief looked back at the destruction. The Necron fighters, the tomb blades that had been tearing through the longsword squadrons, were faltering, losing cohesion as their resurrection point was destroyed. The battle in the void began to turn in the UNSC's favor. "Mission accomplished," Palmer said, leaning against the bulkhead, her damaged shoulder plate sparking. "We just killed a ship that was older than human civilization." "We damaged it," Jerome corrected grimly. "The Necrons don't die. They phase out, They regenerate, they resurrect. We bought time, that's all. Chief nodded, saying nothing. Jerome was right. They hadn't won. They just survived another day. Back aboard the Infinity, Captain Lasky watched the Necron ship's death throes on the main viewer. Around him, the bridge crew cheered, exhaustion momentarily forgotten in the rush of victory. But Lasky didn't cheer. He was looking at the sensor data Professor Anders had compiled during the battle. The energy emissions from the dying Necron ship had created a pulse, a signal that radiated out into the ghoul stars, a signal that had been received. "Captain," Anders said quietly, pulling up a star chart. "The Necron ship sent a distress signal before it was destroyed, and it was answered. I'm detecting multiple responses from at least 4 nearby systems. They're all showing the same power signatures. Tomb worlds. Waking up." The cheering died as the implications became clear. They had won the battle. But in doing so, they had announced their presence to an empire of immortal machines that viewed organic life as vermin. The Necrons knew the UNSC was here, and they were coming. The war room aboard the Infinity had become a somber place of harsh realities. Holographic projections displayed a 3-dimensional map of the ghoul stars, with 4 star systems now pulsing angry red. Confirmed Necron tomb worlds responding to the distress signal. The closest was 18 light years away. The farthest, 43. All of them were awakening. "Estimated time until the nearest Necron force can reach our position?" Captain Lasky asked, his voice carrying the exhaustion of a man who'd been in combat readiness for 72 hours straight. "Depends on their FTL capabilities," Commander Bradley replied, manipulating the display. "If they use something comparable to our slip space or the Imperium's warp drives, we're looking at 3 to 7 days. But we have no data on Necron faster than light travel. For all we know, they could be here in hours." Captain Cutter stood beside Lasky, studying the map with the calculating eye of a commander who'd spent decades making impossible choices. "We can't fight them. Not if they come in force. We hurt one ship barely, with perfectly coordinated fire and a suicide boarding action. If they send a fleet..." He left the thought unfinished. "Then we leave," Commander Palmer said bluntly from her position near the tactical display. Her damaged shoulder plate had been replaced, but the memory of how easily Necron technology had erased UNSC armor remained fresh. "We pack up, run deep into the Gulf, and hope they don't follow." "Run where?" Professor Anders challenged, pulling up survey data. "We've scouted 15 systems. Most are dead rocks or gas giants. The 3 habitable worlds we found are primitive. No infrastructure, no resources we can use without months of development. And we're not alone out here." She expanded the display, highlighting thermal signatures and electromagnetic emissions from one of the habitable worlds in a system designated Harmony 7. "This planet has a human population. We detected settlements, basic agriculture, radio emissions. They're descendants of lost colonists, probably stranded during the Age of Strife. Maybe 5 million people total, living at early industrial age technology levels. So, we're not the only ones who got lost out here," Lasky said quietly. "How many other systems show signs of human habitation?" "At least 3 confirmed," Anders replied. "Possibly 7 more with ambiguous readings. The ghoul stars aren't empty, Captain. They're a graveyard of lost colonies, forgotten worlds, survivors clinging to life in the spaces between empires. And now the Necrons are waking up to reclaim what they consider rightfully theirs." The implications hung heavy in the room. They weren't just running for their own survival. There were millions of humans out here who didn't even know the Necrons existed, who would be exterminated without warning or mercy. "We need a plan," Cutter said, his command presence reasserting itself despite being technically junior to Lasky. "And we need it fast, because right now, we have 3 options, all bad. We can run and abandon these colonists to their fate. We can stay and fight a war we can't win, or we can try something insane." "I'm listening," Lasky said. Cutter pulled up detailed scans of Harmony 7. "The colonists have been here for thousands of years, which means they've survived without Necron interference. Either the tomb world in this system never woke up, or there isn't one. If we're going to make a stand anywhere, it should be here. We establish a base, we fortify it, and we start evacuating colonists from the other systems before the Necrons reach them. You want to build a fortress in enemy territory and then start rescuing people," Palmer summarized. "That's not insane, that's suicidal. We don't have the resources, the time, or the personnel. We have 2 capital ships, 300 Spartans and ODSTs, and 17,000 crew who are damn good at their jobs," Cutter countered. "And we have something else: desperation and determination. The UNSC survived the Covenant War because we refused to give up, even when extinction was the logical outcome. This is the same thing." "No," Chief said quietly, speaking for the first time since entering the briefing. All eyes turned to the Spartan. "It's worse. The Covenant wanted to exterminate us, but they were mortal. They could be killed, worn down, outmaneuvered. The Necrons are immortal machines with technology we barely understand. Every battle we fight, we lose soldiers we can't replace. Every Necron we destroy just resurrects to fight again. The math doesn't work in our favor." "Then we change the math," Spartan Jerome interjected, the veteran's scarred armor reflecting the holographic displays. "The Necrons are machines. Machines have programming, protocols, weaknesses. We board their tomb worlds before they fully wake up, and we sabotage them from within. Turn their own resurrection protocols against them, make them sleep forever. That would require detailed knowledge of Necron technology we don't have," Professor Anders objected. "And even if we did, tomb worlds are planetary fortifications. They could have billions of warriors in storage. We'd be overwhelmed." "So we don't fight fair," Buck suggested, his ODST background showing through. "We use orbital strikes. We collapse their underground complexes. We make the whole damn planet uninhabitable if we have to. Scorched Earth doctrine. The Necrons can't reclaim worlds that don't exist anymore." The discussion continued, proposals becoming increasingly desperate. Lasky listened to all of it, feeling the weight of command pressing down like a physical force. Every option was a gamble. Every path led through darkness with no guarantee of survival. A chime from the communication station interrupted the debate. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission. Origin point is Harmony 7, the colonist planet. They're hailing us." "They have FTL communication?" Bradley asked, surprised. "Their technology level shouldn't support that." "Put it through," Lasky ordered. The holographic display flickered, and a face appeared. Human, female, middle-aged, with weather-worn features and eyes that held the calculating intelligence of a survivor. She wore simple clothes that suggested agricultural lifestyle, but there was a tactical radio headset visible over one ear, and the background behind her showed equipment that didn't match the primitive technology level Anders had detected. "UNSC Infinity," the woman said without preamble, her accent a strange mixture of archaic English and something else. This is Magister Ilara Voss of the Harmony Collective. We detected your engagement with the Sleepers, the metal devils we've been hiding from for 1,000 years. You hurt one of their ships. They'll be coming for you now. And when they come for you, they'll come for us too. We need to talk. Lasky exchanged glances with Cutter. Magister Voss, I'm Captain Thomas Lasky. You're aware of the Necrons? The Necrons? Voss's expression showed recognition, mixed with bitter amusement. Is that what the galaxy calls them now? We call them the Sleepers, the Harvest, the end of all things. Our ancestors survived their last awakening 3,000 years ago by hiding underground, by making ourselves invisible, by praying they'd go back to sleep before finding us. It worked, until you woke them up with your battle. We didn't know, Lasky began. I know you didn't, Voss interrupted, her tone pragmatic rather than accusatory. And I'm not blaming you. You're refugees, same as we are. Lost children of Earth trying to survive in a universe that wants us dead. But now we have a common problem. The Sleepers are coming, for both of us. Separately, we die. Together, she paused. Together, we might last long enough to matter. What are you proposing? Cutter asked. An alliance, Voss replied. The Harmony Collective has resources you need, raw materials, infrastructure, manpower. We've been preparing for the Sleepers' return for generations. We have shelters that can hide populations, weapons designed specifically for fighting them, and intelligence on at least 2 tomb complexes in this system. You have something we need, the ability to actually hurt them. Mobility, fire support from orbit. And those soldiers of yours. Her gaze focused on Chief, visible in the background. Soldiers who can board a sleeper ship and live to tell about it. Lasky looked at his senior staff, seeing the same thought reflected in their faces. They'd come to the Ghoul Stars looking for independence, for freedom from empires that wanted to use them. But they'd found something else instead. Responsibility. Millions of human lives that would be exterminated if the UNSC ran. Captain Voss, Lasky said carefully, if we commit to defending Harmony 7, we're committing to a war we might not survive. We'll need more than just resources. We'll need complete cooperation, shared intelligence, integration of our forces, and we'll need it fast. You'll have it, Voss replied without hesitation. Send a delegation down. We'll show you what we've built, what we've learned, and what we're willing to do to survive. And, Captain, welcome to the Ghoul Stars, where humanity doesn't give up. We just get more creative about staying alive. The transmission ended. The war room fell silent as the implications sank in. They'd found what they'd been looking for. Other humans, unconnected to the Imperium or the Tau, who remembered what it meant to fight for something beyond mere survival. But they'd also just committed to defending them against an empire of immortal machines that had conquered the galaxy when humanity's ancestors were still living in caves. Well, Palmer said dryly, breaking the silence, I guess we're not running after all. No, Lasky agreed, feeling something he hadn't felt in months, purpose beyond mere survival. We're not running. We're making a stand. Here, now. And we're going to show the Necrons that humanity, UNSC humanity, doesn't go quietly into extinction. He turned to his senior staff. Cutter, you and I will lead the delegation to Harmony 7. Chief, Palmer, Jerome, I want you 3 to start planning defensive operations. If the Necrons come, we need to be ready to bleed them. Anders, work with Voss's people. Learn everything they know about Necron technology. Bradley, coordinate with the Spirit of Fire. I want both ships combat ready and every fighter squadron prepped for deployment. Orders flowed, the room becoming a hive of purposeful activity. But as the meeting broke up, Chief approached Lasky privately. "Captain, a word." Lasky nodded, and they moved to a quiet corner of the war room. "Sir, I need you to understand what we're committing to," Chief said quietly. "This isn't a battle. This isn't even a war. This is a holding action against an enemy that can't be defeated, only delayed. Every day we survive will be a miracle. Every week, a triumph. We could fight for years and still lose everything." "I know," Lasky replied. "But what's the alternative? We run, and we become exactly what the Imperium already thinks we are. Cowards who only care about our own survival. We stay, and maybe we die. But we die as UNSC. We die protecting people who can't protect themselves. That still means something, doesn't it?" Chief was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Yes, sir, it does." As the Spartan turned to leave, Lasky called after him. "Chief, when the Necrons come, and they will come, I'm going to need you to do what you do best." "What's that, sir?" "Win a war we have no business winning." Chief's helmet turned slightly, the faceplate reflecting Lasky's tired face. "I'll do my best, Captain. That's all I've ever done." And as Master Chief walked away to begin planning the impossible, Lasky looked at the holographic map of the Ghoul stars. Somewhere out there, tomb worlds were awakening. Ancient machines were stirring from millions of years of sleep. Their immortal warriors preparing to reclaim a galaxy they considered rightfully theirs. But they were about to discover something the Covenant had learned the hard way. Something the Imperium was still learning, something that even the Tau didn't fully understand. Humanity was at its most dangerous when backed into a corner with no way out. And the UNSC was about to show the 41st millennium what 30,000 years of evolution in the wrong direction had cost the species that wore the Imperium's chains. They were going to show them what humanity used to be, what it could still be, what it would fight to remain, even unto the very last soldier standing against the dying of the light. The Pelican descended through Harmony 7's atmosphere, its hull rattling as it pierced thin clouds that hung over a landscape of surprising green. Captain Lasky sat in the troop bay beside Captain Cutter, both men watching through the viewport as the planet revealed itself. It wasn't the barren wasteland they'd expected. Vast forests stretched across rolling hills, rivers carved through valleys, and scattered across the landscape were settlements. Not primitive villages, but organized towns with geometric street patterns and what looked like industrial facilities. "This doesn't match our initial scans," Cutter observed. Anders reported early industrial age technology, radio communications, basic infrastructure. But that... He pointed to a massive structure visible on the horizon, a dome easily a kilometer across, built from what looked like reinforced concrete and steel. "That's not primitive. They've been hiding," Chief said from his position near the rear ramp, his armor's active camouflage disabled now that they were committed to contact. "Everything above ground is deliberately kept low-tech. Anything that might register on orbital scans is concealed. They've been invisible by choice." The Pelican touched down on a landing pad that, despite appearing to be simple packed earth, proved solid enough to support the dropship's weight. The ramp lowered, and Lasky stepped out into warm sunlight and air that smelled of vegetation and wood smoke, familiar, earthly scents that seemed impossible in the darkness of the 41st millennium. A delegation waited for them. Magister Alara Voss stood at the center, flanked by a dozen others wearing a mixture of simple robes and practical work clothes. But Lasky's tactical eye caught the details. The way they held themselves, the subtle bulges under clothing that suggested concealed weapons, the disciplined spacing that spoke of military training. "Captain Lasky, Captain Cutter." Voss greeted them formally, her hand extended in an ancient gesture of peace. "Welcome to Harmony. I apologize for the deception regarding our capabilities. Trust is difficult to come by in the Ghoul Stars." "Understandable," Lasky replied, accepting the handshake. "We've learned that lesson ourselves recently. You said you've been preparing for the Necron's return. I'd like to see what that preparation looks like." "Follow me," Voss said, leading them toward the massive dome structure. "What you're about to see, we've kept hidden for 3 millennia. You'll understand why." The dome's entrance was disguised as a natural cave mouth, but once inside, the illusion dropped away. The cave opened into a massive underground complex carved from living rock and reinforced with support beams that showed wear from centuries of use. Electric lights, actual electric lights, not the flickering candles or oil lamps of primitive societies, illuminated corridors that stretched into darkness. 3,000 years ago, Voss explained as they walked, our ancestors fled the Sleepers' awakening. They'd been a prosperous colony during what you probably call the Dark Age of technology. When the Sleepers rose, they couldn't fight. So they hid. They dismantled their cities, buried their technology, and retreated underground. For generations, they lived like rats in the dark, barely surviving. They entered a massive chamber that made even Lasky stop and stare. It was a factory floor, easily the size of 3 football fields, filled with assembly lines and machinery. But not primitive machinery. These were sophisticated manufacturing systems, and they were producing weapons. "We never forgot who we were," Voss continued. "And we never stopped preparing. Every generation, we maintained the knowledge, refined it, improved it. We couldn't build starships or advanced AI. The Sleepers' sensors would detect that level of technology. But we could build this." She gestured to a rack of weapons that looked like they belonged in a UNSC armory. Gauss-resistant alloys, electromagnetic pulse weapons designed to disrupt Necron resurrection protocols, seismic charges that can collapse tomb structures. 3,000 years of innovation focused on a single goal: killing machines that won't stay dead. Professor Anders, who'd accompanied the delegation, approached one of the weapons with scientific fascination. "This is remarkable. You've developed counter-Necron technology independently, without any reference to Mechanicus doctrines or Tau engineering principles. How?" "Trial and error," Voss said grimly. "And a lot of dead test subjects. The Sleepers don't take prisoners, but sometimes they leave damaged warriors behind. We've been dissecting them, learning how they work. It's slow, dangerous work. But we've learned their weaknesses." She led them to another section where what looked like a partial Necron warrior lay on an examination table, its living metal inert. They're not truly immortal. The resurrection requires quantum entanglement with their tomb's central matrix. Break that connection, usually through massive electromagnetic interference, and they can't phase out when destroyed. They die, properly and permanently. Chief approached the table, studying the Necron remains with the eye of a soldier who'd fought them. "How large of an EMP are we talking about?" "Large," Voss admitted. "Our projections suggest we'd need to detonate multiple devices simultaneously to create a field strong enough to cover even a small engagement zone. And the EMP affects our own electronics too. It's a desperation weapon, not a tactical solution." "But it works," Cutter said. "You field tested it?" "Once. 50 years ago, when a Sleeper scout ship entered the system, we lured it down to the surface, hit it with everything we had, and finished off the warriors with conventional weapons once their resurrection failed. We lost 300 people in that engagement, but we won. Proved it could be done. Lasky exchanged glances with Cutter. 50 years ago, these people had faced down a Necron ship with primitive weapons and won through sheer desperation and ingenuity. It was inspiring and terrifying in equal measure. You said you had intelligence on tomb complexes in this system, Lasky said. Show us. They were led to a command center that looked like it had been pulled from a UNSC vessel and buried underground. Holographic displays, cruder than the Infinity systems but functional, showed a planetary map with 2 locations marked in red. Northern continent, Ice Sheet 7, Voss identified. 3,000 years ago, this was where the sleepers emerged. Our ancestors witnessed it. The ground splitting open, pyramids rising from beneath the ice, armies of metal marching out. We've monitored it ever since. The good news is, it went dormant again after destroying our cities. The bad news is, seismic sensors show activity increasing over the past year. It's waking up again. And the second site? Cutter asked. Southern continent, Ash Desert region, Voss said, her expression darkening. This one we didn't know about until 15 years ago. A mining expedition discovered an entrance, a sealed doorway built into solid rock. We sent a team to investigate. 3 people went in, none came out. But one managed to transmit sensor data before the end. The complex is massive, Captain. Kilometers deep, and it's old. Older than the Ice Sheet site. We think it might be a command facility, a Necron Lord's personal tomb. The implications were staggering. 2 tomb complexes, both in various stages of awakening, and the UNSC had just announced their presence by destroying a Necron warship. How long do we have? Lasky asked. Unknown, Voss admitted. The Ice Sheet site could fully wake in days or months. The Ash Desert site is unpredictable. But Captain, there's something else you need to understand about the sleepers. She pulled up historical records, images preserved from 3 millennia ago showing the Necron awakening. They don't just kill, they harvest. They take populations, entire cities, and process them. We don't know for what purpose. But our ancestors watched from hiding as millions of people were marched into sleeper ships and taken away. They never came back. The room fell silent. The Necrons weren't just exterminating humanity in the Ghoul stars. They were harvesting them for some unknown purpose, a fate potentially worse than death. Then we have a mission, Lasky said, his voice hard with determination. We stop the awakening, or at least delay it. Buy time to evacuate the vulnerable colonies and establish defensive positions. How? Voss challenged. You hurt one ship barely. These tomb complexes hold armies, millions of warriors, even with your advanced technology. We go in before they fully wake up. Chief interrupted, his voice carrying absolute certainty. Spartan strike teams, small, fast, surgical. We infiltrate the tomb complexes, plant explosives at critical junctions, and collapse the entire structure. Bury them under a mountain before they can dig themselves out. That's insane, Voss said flatly. The Ash Desert team was killed within hours of entry. You'd be walking into a death trap. That's what Spartans do, Palmer said, having joined the group after inspecting the weapons facility. We're good at it. Jerome nodded in agreement. The Spirit of Fire has been running boarding actions and infiltration missions for decades. If there's a way to sabotage those tombs from inside, we'll find it. Voss studied the Spartans, these armored giants who spoke of suicide missions with casual confidence, and slowly nodded. All right, But you don't go alone. We've been studying the sleepers for 3,000 years. We have scouts who've mapped the approaches to both sites, engineers who understand the structural vulnerabilities, and soldiers who've trained their entire lives to fight machines. You bring the firepower, we bring the knowledge. Together, we might actually pull this off. When do we start? Cutter asked. Immediately, Voss replied. Because our long-range sensors just detected something. The response fleet you were worried about? They're already here. 3 sleeper vessels just entered the outer system. They'll reach Harmony orbit in approximately 72 hours. The room erupted into motion. Lasky was already on his comm, alerting the Infinity. Cutter was coordinating with the Spirit of Fire. Chief was pulling up tactical maps of the tomb sites, already planning approach vectors. One more thing, Voss said, her voice cutting through the chaos. The response fleet isn't the only threat. Our deep space observation posts detected something else moving through the Gulf. A much larger fleet. Imperial Navy, by the signatures. At least 40 vessels. They're heading this way. The Imperium, Lasky said, his stomach sinking. Admiral Vhane must have tracked us, or the Inquisition sent hunters. Either way, we're caught between 2 forces that want us dead, Cutter summarized. The Necrons will be here in 3 days. The Imperials in maybe 7 to 10, depending on warp conditions. We're running out of time. Then we move fast, Chief said. Hit the tombs before the Necrons can fully mobilize. Fortify Harmony before the Imperials arrive, and hope we can do both before everything falls apart. As the delegation rushed to prepare, Lasky found himself standing beside Magister Voss, both of them looking at the holographic display showing the converging threats. You came here looking for freedom, Voss observed. Instead, you found responsibility. Are you regretting it yet? Ask me when this is over, Lasky replied. If we're still alive to answer. Fair enough. Voss pulled up a data file and transferred it to Lasky's datapad. Coordinates for the Ice Sheet Tomb complex, updated structural scans from our observation drones, and a manifest of every asset the Harmony Collective can contribute to the defense. We're all in, Captain. When the sleepers come, we fight together. When the Imperium comes, we fight together. And if we die, she shrugged. At least we die on our feet, not on our knees. That's very UNSC of you, Lasky said with a slight smile. Maybe, Voss replied. Or maybe that's just what humanity looks like when it remembers what it was supposed to be. Before the Imperium, before the greater good, before all the empires that promised protection in exchange for souls. As the Pelican lifted off, carrying the delegation back to the Infinity, Chief stood at the rear ramp looking down at Harmony 7. A world of 5 million people who'd survived in hiding for 3 millennia, who'd never given up hope, who'd prepared for this day with the grim determination of a species that refused to accept extinction. They were about to find out if 3,000 years of preparation was enough to stop an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 60 million. And if it wasn't, the UNSC would make their last stand here, in the darkness between empires, fighting not for territory or ideology, but for the simple right of humanity to exist on its own terms, even if that existence was measured in days rather than decades. The Ice Sheet 7 tomb complex sat like a cancer beneath the frozen wasteland of Harmony 7's northern continent. From orbit, it was invisible, just another expanse of white ice and howling storms. But deep penetrating scans revealed the truth. A pyramid structure 3 kilometers tall, buried under a kilometer of ice, with tunnels and chambers extending deep into the planet's crust. Master Chief stood in the Infinity's primary hangar bay, watching as 2 Pelicans were loaded with enough explosives to crack a small moon. Beside him, a strike force of 10 Spartans and 20 of Harmony's best soldiers, men and women who trained their entire lives for this moment, ran final equipment checks. "The approach is going to be rough," Spartan Jerome said, reviewing the tactical data on his HUD. Surface temperature is -80 Celsius. Winds sustained at 120 kilometers per hour. Even in Mjolnir, we'll be pushing our environmental systems to the limit. Harmony's people have been operating in those conditions for years, Chief replied, nodding toward the colonial soldiers. They wore sealed environmental suits that looked crude compared to Mjolnir, but they moved with the confidence of veterans. If they can handle it, so can we. One of the Harmony soldiers, a woman named Sergeant Kale, who'd apparently spent 15 years mapping the tomb's exterior, approached Chief. Her face was weathered, scarred across the left cheek by what looked like Gauss weapon burns. "Spartan," she said, her accent thick but comprehensible. "You need to understand what you're walking into. The Sleepers don't just guard their tombs with warriors. They have constructs. Machines that maintain the facilities, that patrol the corridors. Some of them are harmless. Repair drones, archival systems. But others," she pulled up a grainy video on her datapad. Footage from some long-ago expedition. "Others are killing machines. We call them wraiths. Fast, deadly, and they phase through walls. Lost 6 people to them during our last survey." Chief studied the footage. The wraith was a skeletal construct that moved with disturbing grace, its blade arms cutting through environmental suits like they were paper. "How do we kill them?" "Sustained fire or overwhelming force," Kyle replied. "They're tougher than warriors, but not invincible. The problem is, they hunt in packs. Where you find one, you'll find 5 more." She paused. "And there's something else. The deeper you go into the tombs, the stronger the presence becomes. It's hard to describe. A pressure on your mind. Whispers in a language you don't understand, but somehow comprehend. Some of our people have gone mad down there. Started tearing off their helmets, screaming about the metal gods demanding worship. We don't know if it's some kind of psychic defense or just the cumulative effect of being surrounded by machines that have been dreaming for millions of years. We've faced psychic threats before," Chief said. Though he remembered Roland's corruption, the whispers of the warp that had driven the AI to madness. "We'll manage." "I hope so," Kale said. "Because if you fail, if the Sleepers fully wake before we can collapse the tomb, my people will be harvested. All 5 million of us. And whatever the Sleepers do with the bodies they take, it's worse than death. We've heard the screaming sometimes, echoing from deep underground, screaming that lasts for days." Before Chief could respond, Captain Lasky's voice came through the hangar speakers. "All strike teams, this is Infinity Actual. Long-range sensors confirm the Necron fleet is accelerating. New ETA is 48 hours. You have a 36-hour window to complete your mission and extract before they arrive. Make it count." The timeline was impossible, but then, impossible timelines were what Spartans trained for. "Mount up," Chief ordered. "We're burning daylight." The descent through Harmony 7's atmosphere was brutal. The Pelicans shook like toys in a child's fist as hurricane-force winds battered them. Ice formed on the viewports faster than the heating elements could melt it. And below, the endless white expanse of the ice sheet stretched to every horizon. "Approaching drop zone," the pilot reported, her voice tight with concentration. "But we've got a problem. The storm is worse than predicted. I can get you down, but extraction is going to be dicey. This bird might not be flyable in these conditions for long. "Land us and get clear," Chief ordered. "We'll signal when we need pickup. If the weather's too bad, we'll find shelter and wait it out." "Copy that. Dropping in 30 seconds." The Pelican touched down, or rather, crashed down, on the ice, its landing gear cracking through the surface layer before finding purchase. The rear ramp dropped, and a wall of screaming wind and ice crystals slammed into the troop bay. Chief was first out, his boots crunching through ice as his armor's environmental seals engaged. The temperature readout in his HUD showed -87 Celsius. The wind was strong enough that even his half-ton of armor and augmented strength had to lean into it to stay upright. The rest of the strike team deployed, Spartans forming a defensive perimeter while the Harmony soldiers secured their equipment sleds. Compact tracked vehicles loaded with explosives, surveying gear, and enough supplies for 3 days of operation. "This way," Kale shouted over the wind, her voice crackling through the comm system. "The entrance is 2 kilometers northeast." They marched through hell, frozen over. Visibility dropped to less than 10 meters. The wind threatened to lift even the Spartans off their feet. And the cold was so intense that Chief's armor logged multiple warnings about frozen actuators and compromised seals. It took 4 hours to cover 2 kilometers. The entrance, when they finally reached it, was anticlimactic. A crack in the ice no more than 3 meters wide, barely visible through the storm. But Kale's scanning equipment confirmed it. This fissure led down through the ice, down to the buried tomb beneath. "Ropes," Kale ordered her people. "We descend one at a time. Spartans first, to secure the bottom, then equipment, then the rest of us." Chief attached a grappling line to his armor and lowered himself into the crack. The ice walls were smooth, almost glassy, carved by something that had melted through them. 40 meters down, the crack opened into a cavern. Chief dropped the last 3 meters, landed in a crouch, and brought his assault rifle up. The cavern was vast, easily 100 meters across, and it wasn't natural. The walls were too smooth, too geometric. And at the far end, partially buried in fallen ice, was a doorway. Not human construction, not Forerunner. Something else. Something angular and alien, and covered in hieroglyphs that seemed to writhe when observed directly. "Clear," Chief reported, deploying lights and securing the area. One by one, the strike team descended. Spartans established a perimeter. Harmony soldiers set up portable heaters and workstations. And Professor Anders, who'd insisted on accompanying the mission despite protests, immediately began scanning the doorway with equipment that looked cobbled together from 3 different technologies. "This is Necron tier script," Anders said, her voice filled with academic fascination despite the danger. "Pre-biotransference. Before they became machines, they were organic. This writing is from that era. It's a warning." "What does it say?" Jerome asked. Anders was quiet for a moment, her scanning equipment translating the ancient text. It says, "Here lies Overlord Amontek the Unyielding, Lord of the Sautek dynasty, breaker of suns, he who does not sleep. Disturb not the eternal rest, for the punishment of awakening is death eternal." "Cheerful," Palmer commented. "I'm guessing death eternal isn't just hyperbole." "Probably not," Anders agreed. "Necron overlords are the commanders of their legions. If this is his personal tomb, he'll have an honor guard. Elite warriors? Possibly royal guard constructs. And if the warning is accurate, he's not fully dormant. He's in some kind of half-sleep state, aware enough to respond to threats. Then we make sure he doesn't wake up," Chief said. He approached the doorway, examining the seal. It was solid metal, no visible hinges or locks. Breaching charges? No, Kyle interjected. Explosives will alert the tomb's defenses. We need to open it the way the sleepers intended. She pulled out a device that looked like a tuning fork mated to a quantum computer. Harmonic resonance key. We've been developing it for 50 years, based on salvaged sleeper technology. It should convince the door we're authorized to enter. She activated the device, and a sound that was more felt than heard resonated through the cavern. The hieroglyphs on the doorway began to glow with sickly green light. And slowly, impossibly, the solid metal door began to dissolve, atoms rearranging themselves until there was simply an open archway leading into absolute darkness. It worked, Kyle said, surprise evident in her voice. Emperor's teeth, it actually worked. Don't celebrate yet, Chief said, activating his armor's full-spectrum lighting. The beams lanced into the darkness, revealing a corridor that stretched down at a precise angle. Walls covered in more hieroglyphs and geometric patterns that hurt to look at. We're just getting started. The strike team entered the tomb of Overlord Amontek, and the darkness swallowed them whole. Behind them, unnoticed in the chaos of the storm, the hieroglyphs on the doorway's frame began to pulse with increasing intensity. And deep below, in chambers that had been silent for 3 millennia, ancient mechanisms stirred. Something was waking up, and it was not pleased. Captain Lasky stood on the Infinity's bridge, watching the tactical display with growing dread. The 3 Necron vessels that had entered the system were no longer accelerating toward Harmony 7. They'd stopped at the system's outer edge, holding position in what could only be a blockade formation. They're not attacking, Commander Bradley observed. They're waiting. Why? Because they know we can't leave. Professor Anders' voice came through from the surface, transmitted with a lag that spoke of distance and interference. The Necrons are patient. They're giving their tomb time to wake fully. When the Overlord rises, he'll want to deal with us personally. It's a matter of honor, or pride, or whatever passes for emotion in a machine mind that's millions of years old. How long until the tomb is fully active? Lasky asked. Unknown, but Chief's team is making progress. They've descended 3 levels into the complex. No casualties yet, though they've encountered automated defenses. If they can reach the central chamber and plant the charges before the Overlord fully wakes. A new alert screamed across the bridge. The sensor officer's face went pale. Captain, new contacts. Emerging from the Ash Desert site. The second tomb complex. Multiple signatures. They're warriors. Thousands of them. They're marching toward the nearest Harmony settlement. Lasky pulled up the feed. Through orbital surveillance, he watched as the ground split open, and from the depths emerged an army. Skeletal warriors in perfect formation, their gauss flares gleaming in the sunlight. Massive floating barges carrying larger constructs. Tomb spiders the size of tanks, floating platforms mounting what looked like heavy weapons, and at the center, something enormous. A construct that towered over the others, covered in ornate armor and crackling with green energy. That's a Necron Lord, Anders identified, her voice horrified. Not the Overlord, but his second in command. The Ash Desert tomb is fully awake, and it's launching an assault on the surface colonies. How many warriors? Lasky demanded. Scanning. Emperor's Mercy. At least 50,000. And more emerging every minute. Captain, Harmony's surface defenses can't stop this. They'll be overwhelmed in hours. Lasky made the decision in a heartbeat. Cutter, this is Lasky. Split the fleet. You take Spirit of Fire and engage the Ash Desert Force. Orbital bombardment, everything you've got. Slow them down. I'll stay in orbit over the Ice Sheet site to provide extraction support for Chief's team and counter the Necron blockade if they make a move. Understood, Cutter replied immediately. Spirit of Fire moving to intercept. And Lasky, good luck. Something tells me we're going to need it. As the Spirit of Fire broke orbit and accelerated toward the Ash Desert, Lasky watched the tactical display update in real time. 2 tomb complexes awakening simultaneously. A Necron fleet blocking their exit. An Imperial fleet approaching from outside the system. And a strike team deep underground, racing to sabotage a tomb before its master woke and called down death on them all. The situation was impossible. But the UNSC had built its entire reputation on achieving the impossible. All hands, Lasky announced shipwide, battle stations. This is what we came here to do. This is what makes us different from every other faction in this nightmare galaxy. We don't abandon people. We don't sacrifice the weak to save the strong. We fight for every life, even when the odds say we should run. So let's show the Necrons what humanity looks like when it refuses to die quietly. Let's show them the UNSC. On the bridge, the crew responded with a cheer that echoed through the corridors. It wasn't the grim resignation of Imperial soldiers or the serene acceptance of Tau auxiliaries. It was defiance. Pure, stubborn, human defiance against a universe that wanted them dead. And somewhere deep beneath the ice, Master Chief heard that cheer through his comm link and allowed himself a small, invisible smile. The Necrons had ruled the galaxy for 60 million years. But they'd never faced Spartans before. The tomb's interior was a maze of impossible geometry. Corridors branched at angles that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Staircases descended in directions that defied gravity, and chambers opened into voids where perspective simply stopped making sense. Chief's motion trackers showed the strike team's positions, but the readings flickered and jumped as if the tomb itself was interfering with the sensors. They descended 7 levels without encountering resistance, which should have been reassuring. Instead, it made Chief more cautious. The Necrons were strategic. They wouldn't leave their tomb undefended, which meant the defenses were simply waiting. Movement, Jerome called out, his assault rifle tracking left. Corridor junction, 30 meters. Multiple contacts. The contacts emerged from the darkness. Not Necron warriors, but something else. They looked like scarabs, mechanical constructs the size of large dogs, their bodies bristling with cutting tools and repair implements. Dozens of them, scuttling along the walls and ceiling with insectile precision. Canoptech scarabs, Sergeant Kale identified, her voice tight. Maintenance drones. They're usually harmless unless you threaten the tomb's integrity. One of the scarabs detached from the ceiling and dropped directly onto a Harmony soldier. Its cutting tools activated, and the man screamed as molecular disassemblers began taking apart his environmental suit atom by atom. "Scratch harmless," Palmer said, her magnum barking 3 times. The scarab exploded in a shower of living metal fragments. But 2 more immediately swarmed to take its place. "Suppressing fire," Chief ordered. "Drive them back." The corridor erupted with weapons fire. Assault rifles, magnums, and the Harmony soldiers' Gauss-resistant firearms all poured into the swarm. Scarabs died by the dozens, but they kept coming, pouring from vents and access panels like an endless tide of mechanical insects. "They're after the explosives," one of the Harmony engineers shouted, watching as scarabs swarmed over the equipment sled. "They're dismantling our charges. Protect the payload," Jerome commanded, moving to physically block the scarabs with his armored bulk. His combat knife, a massive blade designed for Spartan strength, carved through scarabs with mechanical efficiency, but they were being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Grenades! Now! Chief pulled a plasma grenade and hurled it into the thickest concentration of scarabs. The detonation vaporized a dozen of them, and the EMP pulse from the explosion disrupted the quantum entanglement of the survivors. They froze, their coordination lost, easy pickings for the strike team's weapons. "Everyone, use grenades," Chief ordered. "The EMP effect disrupts their hive intelligence. Without coordination, they're just targets." The tide turned. Plasma grenades and frag grenades turned the corridor into a killing field. Within 2 minutes, the scarab swarm was destroyed, their remains scattered across the floor in piles of twitching metal fragments. But the damage was done. 3 Harmony soldiers were dead, their environmental suits shredded and their bodies. Chief looked away. Molecular disassembly wasn't a clean death. And half their explosive payload had been compromised. The charges partially dismantled before the scarabs were stopped. "We still have enough," the lead Harmony engineer assessed, checking what remained. "But we'll need to be more precise with placement. No margin for error." "Then we make it count," Chief said. He pulled up the tomb schematics on his HUD, partial maps compiled from Harmony surveillance over 3 millennia. According to these readings, the central chamber is 3 more levels down. That's where the Overlord sleeps. We plant charges at the structural support columns, collapse the chamber, bring down the entire pyramid on top of him. "That's assuming he's still sleeping," Kyle said quietly. "Chief, look at this." She pointed to the walls. The hieroglyphs they'd seen earlier were glowing brighter now, pulsing in rhythmic patterns, and the air itself felt different, charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. "The tomb knows we're here," Kale continued. "It's waking up, faster than we anticipated." As if to confirm her words, a sound echoed through the corridors. Not mechanical, not organic. Something between a grinding, scraping noise that resonated in bone and teeth and the base of the skull. It was the sound of something massive stirring after eons of sleep. "Double time," Chief ordered. "We plant these charges and get out before whatever's making that noise finds us." They descended deeper, the temperature dropping despite being kilometers underground. Frost formed on their armor. Their breath condensed in the air despite sealed environmental systems, and the green glow of the hieroglyphs became the only light, casting everything in an eerie, corpse-light radiance. The central chamber, when they finally reached it, was vast enough to hold a city. The ceiling stretched hundreds of meters overhead, supported by columns of living metal that seemed to phase between solid and translucent. And at the center, on a raised dais surrounded by smaller alcoves, was a sarcophagus. It was massive, 10 meters tall, carved from black metal and covered in more hieroglyphs. Green energy pulsed through channels carved into its surface, following patterns that hurt to observe. And surrounding it, standing in perfect formation like an honor guard frozen in time, were 100 Necron warriors. "The Overlord's tomb," Anders breathed, her scientific instruments going wild. "And those are his immortals, elite warriors. Chief, if they wake up while we're planting charges, then we move fast and quiet." Chief interrupted. He gestured to the strike team. "Spartans, take positions covering the honor guard. Harmony engineers, you have 10 minutes to place your charges. Absolute silence. We don't wake them up unless we have no choice. The engineers moved like ghosts, their training evident in every careful step. They approached the support columns, attaching explosive charges with practiced precision. Each charge was set to create a cascading failure. When one went off, it would trigger sympathetic detonations in the others, bringing down thousands of tons of rock and metal on the chamber. Chief watched the immortals, his assault rifle aimed at the nearest one's head. They were utterly still, more statue than soldier. But their eyes, those glowing green eyes, seemed to follow movement even though the warriors themselves didn't move. It was unnerving, like being watched by something that existed in multiple states simultaneously. "Charges placed," the lead engineer reported after 8 agonizing minutes. "Setting timers for synchronized detonation. We'll have 2 minutes to reach minimum safe distance once we trigger them." "Do it," Chief ordered. Everyone start moving toward the exit. Slow, steady, no sudden movements. They began their retreat, backing away from the chamber while keeping weapons trained on the honor guard. The charge's timers were linked, waiting for the final activation signal. Another 10 meters and they'd be at the corridor entrance. Another 20 and they'd be... One of the Harmony soldiers stumbled, his boot catching on debris. He fell, his weapon clattering across the floor. The sound echoed through the vast chamber like a gunshot. And the Overlord's eyes opened. They were not like the eyes of the lesser warriors. They burned with an intelligence that was old when humanity's ancestors were still learning to make fire. They burned with rage at the violation of his rest. They burned with a hatred that had survived 60 million years of sleep. And they fixed on Master Chief with the attention of a predator recognizing prey. The sarcophagus exploded outward in a shower of living metal fragments. What emerged was a nightmare given form. The Overlord stood 4 meters tall, his body encased in armor that seemed to be both metal and something else. Perhaps flesh once, transmuted into eternal machine. In his hands, he carried a massive war scythe that crackled with green energy. And when he spoke, his voice was the death rattle of civilizations. "Intruders, you dare disturb the rest of Amontech? You dare defile this sacred tomb with your organic filth?" The honor guard activated instantly, their eyes blazing to life. 100 Gauss flares rose, targeting the strike team. "Run!" Chief roared, all stealth abandoned. "Trigger the charges, now!" The lead engineer hit the detonation trigger as the strike team sprinted for the exit. Behind them, the Immortals opened fire, Gauss beams lancing through the air. One Harmony soldier disintegrated, his body unraveled at the molecular level. Another's leg was clipped. He fell screaming, and Jerome grabbed him without breaking stride, carrying the man like a child. The first charges detonated. The support columns shattered, unable to withstand the concentrated explosives. The vast ceiling groaned, stress fractures spreading like lightning across its surface. And with a sound like the end of the world, thousands of tons of rock and metal began to fall. "Faster!" Palmer shouted, the ceiling collapsing behind them like a pursuing wave of destruction. They reached the corridor entrance just as the chamber's ceiling gave way entirely. The Overlord's voice echoed one final time, not words, but a roar of pure rage, and then was cut off as the tomb collapsed on itself, burying everything under an avalanche of debris. Chief didn't stop running. The collapse was spreading, following them up through the levels they'd descended. The tomb was dying, its ancient structure unable to withstand the damage they'd inflicted. Walls cracked. Floors gave way, and behind them, the darkness was filled with the grinding of metal on metal and the howling of something vast and terrible being crushed beneath its own home. They reached the ice cavern 4 minutes later, the entire strike team accounted for, except for the 4 casualties left behind in the chaos. The ropes they'd used to descend were still in place, swaying in the wind from above. "Climb," Chief ordered. "Go, go, go." One by one they ascended, Spartans helping wounded Harmony soldiers, equipment abandoned in the desperate rush to escape. Chief went last, looking back one final time at the tomb entrance. The doorway was no longer open. It had sealed itself, living metal flowing back into place. And deep below, in the darkness, something was digging. Slowly, methodically, refusing to accept burial. The Overlord had survived. But he was trapped, his army crushed, his tomb collapsed around him. It would take him years, maybe decades, to dig himself out. By then, the UNSC would be long gone, or dead, or ruling their own corner of the ghoul stars. Chief pulled himself up through the ice crack and emerged into the screaming storm. The Pelican was waiting, barely visible through the blizzard, its engines struggling against the wind. "Extraction successful," Chief reported to the Infinity. "Tomb complex collapsed. The Overlord is buried but alive. Mission accomplished." "Good work, Chief." Lasky's voice came back, but it carried a tension that spoke of new problems. "But we've got a situation." The Ash Desert tomb launched an assault. Captain Cutter's engaging them now, but it's not going well. Get back to the ship. We're going to need every Spartan we have for what's coming next. As the Pelican lifted off, fighting through the storm toward orbit, Chief looked down at the ice sheet below. Somewhere under all that white, an ancient machine lord raged in his prison, swearing vengeance against the organic filth that had dared to disturb his eternal rest. Let him rage. The UNSC had bigger problems. The Spirit of Fire hung in low orbit above Harmony 7's southern continent, its weapons batteries glowing white-hot from continuous fire. Below, the Ash Desert had become a war zone that defied comprehension. 50,000 Necron warriors marching in perfect formation, unstoppable and unfeeling, advancing on Harmony settlements with the inevitability of a glacier. Captain Cutter stood on his ship's bridge, watching the tactical display with the grim expression of a man who'd fought impossible battles before and knew the mathematics of defeat. "Mac Cannon. Fire for effect," he ordered. "Target grid Alpha 7, maximum yield." The Spirit of Fire's main gun spoke, and a 600-ton slug traveling at a fraction of light speed struck the Necron formation. The kinetic impact cratered the desert, vaporized sand turning to glass, and obliterated 100 warriors in an instant. The formation closed ranks and kept marching. "Archer missile pods, saturation fire. Give me everything we have left." Hundreds of missiles streaked downward, their targeting systems locked on concentrations of Necron forces. Explosions rippled across the desert in a carpet of fire and shrapnel. Another 200 warriors fell, their bodies torn apart by overlapping detonations. The survivors phased out, teleported back to their resurrection barge, and rematerialized 30 seconds later, fully restored and continuing their advance. "Captain," the Spirit of Fire's tactical officer reported, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "We've expended 70% of our ordnance. We've destroyed the same warriors 4, maybe 5 times each. They just keep coming back. At this rate, we'll run dry in another 2 hours, and they'll still be advancing." Cutter's jaw tightened. He'd known this was coming. The Necron's resurrection protocols were the stuff of nightmares. But knowing and experiencing were different things. Every weapon they'd fired, every tactical maneuver, every desperate gambit. None of it mattered when the enemy simply refused to stay dead. "Contact Magister Voss," Cutter ordered. "What's the evacuation status?" Voss's face appeared on the comm screen. Her command post visible behind her, organized chaos as Harmony civilians were loaded onto transports. "We've evacuated the forward settlements. 2 million people moving to the deep bunkers. But Captain, the bunkers were designed to hide from the sleepers, not withstand a direct assault. If they reach the entrances, they won't," Cutter said with more confidence than he felt. "We're buying you time. How long do you need?" 12 hours to get everyone underground and sealed. Another 6 to collapse the access tunnels behind us. 18 hours total. Cutter looked at his tactical display. The Necron formation would reach the first bunker complex in 4 hours at their current pace. Even if the Spirit of Fire expended every remaining weapon, they might buy another hour, maybe 2. The math didn't work. "Captain Cutter," a new voice interrupted. "Professor Anders, transmitting from the Infinity. I've been analyzing the Necron formation patterns. They're not just marching randomly, they're following specific routes, avoiding certain terrain features. I think they're being guided by their command barge, that large construct at the center of their formation. If we could take it out, we've tried." Cutter replied. 3 MAC rounds, 2 full missile salvos. It's got shields we can't penetrate from orbit. Every shot we take just gets absorbed. "Then we don't shoot it from orbit," Chief's voice cut in. He was aboard the returning Pelican, still an hour out from the Infinity. "We board it. Take out its command systems. Without central coordination, the warriors lose tactical cohesion. They'll still fight, but they'll be disorganized, easier to outmaneuver." "Chief, you just got back from destroying a tomb," Lasky objected over the fleet-wide channel. "Your team's exhausted, your armor's damaged. I'm not sending you into another suicide mission when you're already running on fumes." "Then send someone else," Chief replied. "Palmer, Jerome, whoever's fresh. But it needs to be Spartans. Regular forces won't survive long enough to reach the command center." There was a long pause. Then Palmer's voice, carrying that mix of professional assessment and personal determination that defined her. "I'll do it. Give me a fire team, 6 Spartans, 1 Pelican, and covering fire from the Spirit of Fire. We drop hot, hit the barge fast, and slag their command systems before they know what hit them." "Negative," Lasky said immediately. "Palmer, I need you coordinating defensive operations if the Necron blockade." "Tom." Palmer's use of his first name was deliberate, cutting through the chain of command. "You know this is the play. It's risky, but it's the only option that might work. And if we're going to make stands and talk about protecting people instead of just surviving, we need to actually do it, not just talk about it." Lasky closed his eyes, and for a moment, he was back in the officers' academy, learning the hardest lesson of command. Sometimes you had to send good people to die for a chance, not even a certainty, just a chance at victory. "Approved," he said finally. "Palmer, you're greenlit for the boarding action. Captain Cutter, provide maximum fire support. Suppress the warriors around the command barge to give her team a clear approach vector." "Understood," Cutter replied. "And Lasky? When this is over, we need to talk about contingencies. The Infinity and Spirit of Fire can't hold this position indefinitely. If the Imperials arrive while we're still fighting the Necrons, one nightmare at a time, Captain," Lasky said. "First, we save Harmony. Then we figure out how to survive what comes next." Commander Sarah Palmer stood in the Infinity's main hangar bay, watching as her fire team assembled. 6 Spartans, including herself, the best of the Spartan 4 program. veterans who'd survived the introduction to the 41st millennium and come out harder for it. They were checking weapons, reviewing the limited intelligence on Necron command barge interiors, and saying nothing because there was nothing left to say. They all knew the odds. "Spartans," Palmer addressed her team, her voice carrying across the hangar. "We're going into that barge to kill a Necron lord and cripple his command systems. No extraction plan, no backup, no margin for error. We do this, and maybe, we save 5 million people. We fail, and those people get harvested for whatever sick purpose the Necrons have planned. So we're not failing. Questions?" "Just one," Spartan Thorn said, adjusting the charge on his DMR. "When we kill this lord, does he stay dead, or does he resurrect like the others?" "According to Harmony's intelligence, Necron lords are more complex than warriors," Palmer replied. "Their resurrection takes longer, requires more power. If we hit him hard enough, fast enough, he'll be down for hours, long enough to complete the mission." "Good enough for me," Thorn said. The Pelican, designated Shadow 2-1, was heavily modified for this mission. Its armor had been reinforced with salvaged plating from damaged longswords. Its weapons had been upgraded with every spare system the Infinity's armory could provide. It wouldn't last long under sustained fire, but it didn't need to last long, just long enough. "Mount up," Palmer ordered. "And Spartans, if this goes wrong, if we don't make it back, make sure they remember we went down swinging. That's the UNSC way." They boarded in silence, the Pelican's engines roaring to life. Through the hangar's atmospheric shield, Palmer could see Harmony 7 below, a world of 5 million people who'd survived 3,000 years in hiding, who'd never given up hope, who deserved better than to be harvested by ancient machines. The Pelican launched, and Palmer felt that familiar sensation, the moment between safety and combat, the breath before the plunge, the instant where everything could still be called off but never would be. "Shadow 2-1, this is Spirit of Fire Actual." Cutter's voice came through. "We're beginning suppression fire now. You'll have a 30-second window when the warriors are focused on orbital bombardment. Make it count." The desert below erupted in fire as the Spirit of Fire's remaining weapons opened up in a concentrated barrage. Mac rounds cratered the sand. Missiles turned entire square kilometers into hellscapes of flame and shrapnel. And in the center of the formation, the command barge's shields flared brilliant green as they absorbed punishment that would have atomized a mountain. "Now," the pilot shouted. "Going in." The Pelican dove through the maelstrom of fire and death, weaving between the return Gauss fire from Necron warriors. Palmer watched through the cockpit viewport as the command barge grew larger, a massive floating platform 200 meters across, covered in obelisks and what looked like throne chairs occupied by Necron immortals. And at the center, on a raised dais, stood the Lord. He was magnificent and terrible. 3 meters of ornate armor, his staff topped with a skull that pulsed with captured lightning, his form radiating an aura of command that was almost physical. He was watching the orbital bombardment with what might have been contempt, his posture suggesting he barely considered the UNSC's weapons a threat. He didn't see the Pelican coming until it was too late. "Brace for impact," the pilot screamed, and the Pelican slammed into the command barge's upper deck like a meteor. The crash was catastrophic. The dropship's front section crumpled. Alarms screamed, and Palmer felt her armor's inertial dampeners strain to keep her spine from snapping. But they were down, and the rear hatch was still functional. "Go, go, go!" Palmer roared, and the Spartans poured out into a nightmare. The command barge's deck was instantly alive with hostiles. Immortals turned from their stations, Gauss weapons rising. Lich Guard, elite warriors carrying hyperphase swords and dispersion shields, materialized from nowhere, teleporting to defend their lord. And the Lord himself turned, his eyes blazing with fury at the audacity of these organic insects. Palmer's first shot took an immortal in the chest. Her second shattered its head. Her third, fourth, and fifth cleared a path toward the Lord as her fire team laid down, suppressing fire with mechanical precision. "Covering positions," she ordered. "Thorn, with me. We're going for the Lord." They charged across the barge's deck, trading fire with Lich Guard, who moved with impossible speed. Spartan Thorn took a hyperphase blade to his shoulder. The weapon phased through his shields like they weren't there, carving a deep gouge in his armor. He stumbled but kept firing, his DMR putting precise shots into the Lich Guard's optical sensors. Palmer reached the Lord and immediately understood why these beings commanded armies. He moved like liquid mercury, his staff a blur as he parried her melee strikes with contemptuous ease. When he counterattacked, each blow carried enough force to dent her Mjolnir armor. She rolled, came up firing, and watched her rounds simply stop in midair, held by some kind of stasis field. "Spartans, focus fire on the Lord," she commanded. "All weapons, now." 6 Spartans concentrated their fire on a single target. Assault rifles, DMRs, magnums, every weapon they carried poured into the Necron Lord simultaneously. The stasis field flickered, overloaded. Rounds began penetrating. The Lord's armor cracked, and he laughed. It was the most terrible sound Palmer had ever heard. Ancient, bitter, and utterly without mercy. He raised his staff, and green lightning arced out, striking 3 Spartans. They convulsed, their armor's systems going haywire, their shields failing. One fell, smoke rising from melted actuators. "We're not winning this," Thorn shouted over the chaos. "Palmer, new plan. Forget the Lord. Go for the command throne. That obelisk behind him, that's got to be the coordination nexus." Palmer saw it immediately. He was right. The massive obelisk behind the Lord's throne pulsed with energy, lines of power connecting it to every warrior on the battlefield below. It wasn't about killing the Lord. It was about cutting his connection to his army. "Cover me," Palmer ordered, and sprinted past the Lord, dodging his staff strike by millimeters. She reached the obelisk and slapped every explosive charge she carried onto its base. Plasma grenades, thermite charges, shaped demolition packets, everything. The Lord realized what she was doing and turned, abandoning his duel with the other Spartans to stop her. Too late. Palmer triggered the charges and dove. The explosion tore through the command barge's systems in a cascading failure. The obelisk shattered, sending fragments of crystal and metal flying. The energy connections to the warriors below snapped like severed nerves. And the Lord himself was caught in the blast, thrown backward, his ornate armor cracked and smoking. On the battlefield below, 50,000 Necron warriors suddenly lost cohesion. Their perfect formations collapsed. They began fighting independently, no longer coordinated by central command. Some continued advancing, others stopped, confused. A few turned and started firing at each other, their targeting protocols scrambled. "Objective complete," Palmer transmitted to the fleet. "Command systems are down. Warriors are disorganized. Cutter, now's your chance." "Acknowledged," Cutter replied. "All batteries, free fire. Target the scattered formations." The spirit of fire's weapons, used strategically now rather than trying to stem an unstoppable tide, began systematically destroying the disorganized Necron forces. Without coordination, without tactical direction, the warriors were just targets. "Palmer, this is Lasky. Extract immediately. That barge is going to... The command barge began to fall. Its anti-gravity systems, tied to the destroyed command obelisk, failed catastrophically. The massive platform tilted, then plummeted toward the desert below. "Everyone off!" Palmer screamed. "Jump!" The Spartans leaped from the dying barge, their jump packs firing to arrest their fall. Behind them, the barge crashed into the desert, with enough force to register on seismic sensors across the continent. The impact created a crater 100 meters deep. Secondary explosions rippled through the wreckage, and somewhere in that inferno, a Necron lord raged in his broken throne, his army scattered, his authority shattered. Palmer landed hard, her armor's shields finally failing from accumulated damage. Around her, her fire team did the same. Battered, wounded, but alive. 5 Spartans. They'd lost 1 in the fighting on the barge. "Shadow 2-1, this is Palmer," she transmitted, looking up at the sky where smoke trails marked the Pelican's death. "We need extraction. Our ride's totaled." "Copy that, Palmer," a new voice responded, one of the Infinity's rescue pilots. "Pelican Shadow 47 inbound, ETA 3 minutes. And ma'am, that was the single craziest thing I've ever seen. Remind me never to piss off Spartans." "Noted," Palmer said, allowing herself a small smile. On the Spirit of Fire, Cutter watched the tactical display as the Necron threat level dropped from critical to manageable. The warriors were still dangerous, still fighting, but they were no longer an unstoppable army. They were individual targets that could be outmaneuvered, outfought, overwhelmed. "All units, maintain pressure," he ordered. "Harmony ground forces, begin counter-offensive operations. Drive them away from the bunker complexes. We're winning." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't over. The Necrons could rebuild. They could resurrect their fallen. And somewhere in the wreckage of that command barge, a lord was already beginning his recovery, his living metal repairing itself, his consciousness plotting revenge against the organic vermin who dared to wound him. This was a victory. But in the 41st millennium, victories were just intervals between defeats. And the next defeat was already on its way. An Imperial fleet, 40 ships strong, bearing down on the Ghoul Stars with fire and fury and the absolute certainty that the UNSC would burn for its heresy. The war room aboard the Infinity had become a place of exhausted calculation. Holographic displays showed multiple crisis points simultaneously. The scattered Necron forces on Harmony 7's surface, the 3 tomb ships maintaining blockade positions at the system's edge, and the Nightmare approaching from beyond. 40 Imperial vessels, their warp signatures burning like brands across the void. Captain Lasky stood at the center of it all, his uniform rumpled from 72 hours of continuous command. His eyes bloodshot, but focused. Around him, his senior staff looked equally haggard. This was what command in the 41st millennium looked like. Constant crisis, impossible choices, and the knowledge that every decision made now would echo across the lives of everyone under their protection. "Tactical assessment," Lasky said, his voice hoarse. "Give me the reality, not the hope." Commander Bradley pulled up fleet dispositions. The Necron ground forces are scattered, but not destroyed. Captain Cutter's bombardment and Palmer's disruption of their command structure bought us time. The warriors are fighting independently now, which makes them vulnerable to Harmony's ground forces. Magister Voss reports they're holding defensive positions and can maintain those positions for maybe 72 more hours before exhaustion and ammunition depletion become critical. He shifted the display to orbital space. The 3 Necron ships at the system's edge haven't moved. They're waiting. My assessment is they're buying time for their ground forces to complete whatever objective they had, probably harvesting population centers before our intervention disrupted their operations. But they're also watching us. If we try to leave, they'll move to intercept. And the Imperials? Cutter asked, having joined via hololink from the Spirit of Fire. 8 days out at current speed, Bradley replied. 40 ships, including the Eternal Vigil. Admiral Vhane is coming personally, which means this isn't just a punitive expedition. This is a crusade. They want the Infinity's technology, and they want to make an example of us for defying Imperial authority. So we're trapped, Palmer summarized, her armor still showing scorch marks from the command barge assault. Necron's blockading the system, Imperials incoming, and we're committed to defending 5 million colonists who can't evacuate fast enough, even if we had somewhere to take them. It's worse than that, Professor Anders interjected, pulling up sensor data. The ice sheet tomb, the one Chief collapsed, is showing renewed activity. Seismic readings indicate something is digging up from below. The Overlord survived, and he's clawing his way out. Estimated time until he reaches the surface, 4 to 6 days. The room fell silent as the implications crystallized. Multiple tomb complexes awakening, a Necron fleet waiting, an Imperial armada approaching, and no way out that didn't involve abandoning millions of people to their fate. We need a force multiplier, Chief said quietly from his position near the wall. He'd returned from the ice sheet mission only hours ago, but showed no signs of fatigue. Spartans didn't, not when people were counting on them. Something that changes the math, makes us strong enough to survive what's coming. Such as? Lasky asked. Allies, Chief replied. Or weapons. Or both. He pulled up a star chart showing the surrounding systems. The ghoul stars aren't empty. Professor Anders identified at least 7 other systems with human populations. Lost colonies like Harmony. If we could contact them, coordinate defenses, we'd have more ships, more soldiers, more resources. That would take weeks, Bradley objected. Time we don't have. Then we need weapons, Spartan Jerome suggested. The veteran's tactical mind, working through possibilities. The Necrons have been here for millions of years. Their tombs contain technology that makes our best equipment look primitive. If we could salvage something from the collapsed ice sheet tomb or the destroyed command barge. You want to steal Necron technology? Anders interrupted, her expression showing both scientific fascination and horror. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? Necron weapons are quantum entangled with their tomb worlds. They're biologically keyed to Necron physiology. A human trying to use a Gauss flare would be as likely to disintegrate themselves as their target. Then we don't use their weapons, Chief said. We use their power sources, their shields, their FTL technology. Anything we can reverse engineer and adapt to our own systems. He looked at Lasky. Captain, the Infinity's slip space drive is still damaged. We can't leave the system even if we wanted to. But if we could salvage Necron propulsion systems, integrate them with our own, that would take months of research, Glassman interjected, having joined the meeting via comlink from engineering. And that's assuming we could even understand the principles involved. Necron technology operates on physics we don't have equations for. We have something better than equations, Chief said. We have Harmony. They've been studying Necron technology for 3,000 years. They built weapons that work. They cracked Necron door locks. They understand these machines better than anyone else in the galaxy, including the Mechanicus. If we combine their knowledge with our engineering capabilities. It's still a long shot, Lasky said. but there was something in his voice, a spark of hope that hadn't been there moments before. "But it's a shot, which is more than we had a minute ago." He turned to Cutter. "Captain, can the Spirit of Fire spare an engineering team? We'll need all hands on this." "Already assembling them," Cutter replied. "And Lasky, I want to propose something else. Something radical. We're listening. We've been thinking about this defensively. How do we survive the Necrons and the Imperials both coming after us? But what if we flip the script? What if we make them fight each other?" The room went quiet, everyone processing the implications. "You want to turn the Necrons and Imperials against each other," Palmer said slowly. "Use them to solve our problem for us. The enemy of my enemy isn't necessarily my friend," Cutter said. "But they can be a convenient distraction. The Imperials are coming here to destroy us. The Necrons want to reclaim their territory and harvest the human population. Those goals are mutually exclusive. If we could arrange for them to arrive at the same time, in the same place, and start shooting at each other instead of us, we'd still have to survive the winter," Bradley pointed out. "True," Cutter acknowledged. "But the winner would be wounded, depleted, exhausted, easier to fight or evade. And there's something else. The Imperials are fanatics. But they're not stupid. They know about the Necrons. They know how dangerous tomb worlds are. If they arrive to find an active Necron presence, they might decide we're not worth the risk. They might just blockade the system and wait for the Necrons to kill us for them. Or they might see it as an opportunity to destroy both threats simultaneously," Lasky countered. "Admiral Vhane strikes me as the type who'd see killing Xenos and heretics in one campaign as efficient resource allocation. Which is why we make it not efficient," Chief said, following Cutter's logic. "We feed the Imperials intelligence, real intelligence, not fabrication, about the Necron presence, size of the force, capabilities, threat level. Make it look bad enough that even an Imperial Admiral would think twice. Then we offer a deal. We help them fight the Necrons in exchange for our freedom afterward." "They'd never honor that deal," Palmer said flatly. "Probably not," Chief agreed. "But they might pretend to. Long enough for us to use them as a shield against the Necrons while we finish repairs and prepare to run." Lasky looked around the room, seeing the faces of his officers, exhausted, battered, but still thinking, still planning, still fighting. 6 months ago, they'd been explorers embarking on a mission of discovery. Now they were commanders of a renegade fleet, plotting Byzantine schemes to survive in a universe that wanted them dead. "All right," Lasky decided. "We implement both plans simultaneously. Team 1, Chief, Jerome, and a salvage crew. You go to the destroyed command barge and the ice sheet tomb entrance. Recover anything that might be useful. Necron technology, intact systems, power cores, whatever you can find. Work with Harmony's engineers to figure out what we can use." He turned to Anders. "Professor, you coordinate with Magister Voss. I want a full download of everything Harmony has learned about Necron technology over 3 millennia. Every weakness, every trick, every piece of intelligence that might give us an edge. Bradley, start drafting a message to Admiral Vhane. Make it look like a desperate plea for help. We've encountered Xenos forces. We're pinned down. We need Imperial assistance. Stroke his ego. Make him think we're ready to submit if he just saves us from the Necrons. We send it on a delayed transmission, timed to reach him just as he enters the system. Palmer, you coordinate ground defenses with Harmony forces. If the Necron warriors regroup or that Overlord digs himself out earlier than predicted, we need to be ready. Fortify the bunker approaches. Prepare fallback positions. Make every meter of ground cost them. And Captain Cutter, Lasky continued, I need the Spirit of Fire ready for immediate deployment. If this goes sideways, if the Necrons overwhelm our ground forces, or the Imperials arrive ahead of schedule, or the salvage operation goes wrong, you're our ace in the hole. The ship that can still run, still fight, still matter. Cutter nodded grimly. Understood. We'll be ready. As the meeting broke up and officers dispersed to their assignments, Chief approached Lasky privately. Captain, a word. They moved to a corner of the war room, away from the holographic displays and monitoring stations. You realize this plan has about a dozen points where it could catastrophically fail, Chief said quietly. I'm aware, Lasky replied. But I'm out of good options. Hell, I'm out of mediocre options. This is what we've got. A complicated gambit that requires perfect timing, multiple miracles, and the enemy cooperating by being exactly as predictable as we need them to be. And if they're not? Lasky was quiet for a moment, staring at the tactical displays showing all the threats converging on Harmony 7. Then we do what the UNSC has always done. We fight until we can't fight anymore. We protect the people who can't protect themselves. And we make damn sure that when historians look back, if there are any historians left to look back, they'll say we stood for something, that we didn't become monsters just to survive in a universe of monsters. That's a good epitaph, Chief observed. Let's try not to need it just yet, Lasky said with a tired smile. Get your team ready for the salvage operation. And Chief, if you find anything down there that could actually help us, any Necron superweapon or ancient technology or miracle cure for our problems, I don't care how dangerous it is. Bring it back. We're past the point of being cautious. Understood, sir. As Chief left to assemble his salvage team, Lasky returned to the tactical display. 8 days until the Imperials arrived. 4 to 6 days until the Overlord dug himself out. 72 hours until Harmony's ground forces became combat ineffective from exhaustion. The clock was ticking on multiple fronts simultaneously, each one a countdown to disaster. But the UNSC had built its reputation on beating countdowns. Lasky just hoped that reputation would be enough to see them through what was coming. Because if it wasn't, the last free humans in the galaxy, the last people who remembered what it meant to stand for something beyond mere survival, Okto, would be exterminated by ancient machines or enslaved by religious fanatics. And the 41st millennium would be just that much darker for their absence. Somewhere in the depths of the ice sheet tomb, Overlord of Montek clawed his way through collapsed rock and twisted metal, driven by a rage that had burned for 60 million years. Above him, organic filth scurried and plotted, believing themselves clever, believing themselves safe. He would teach them the price of disturbing the sleep of gods. He would show them what it meant to defy the infinite empire. And when he emerged from his grave, the harvest would begin in earnest. The wreckage of the Necron command barge jutted from the ash desert like the rib cage of a dead god. Twisted living metal still pulsed with faint green energy, trying futilely to repair itself. But the catastrophic damage from the fall had overwhelmed even Necron's self-repair capabilities. Sand had already begun to drift over the exposed sections, the desert reclaiming what had fallen from the sky. Master Chief stood at the crater's edge, studying the wreck through his visor's enhanced optics. Beside him, Spartan Jerome and a team of UNSC engineers waited, along with a dozen of Harmony's most experienced salvage specialists. people who'd spent lifetimes learning how to safely extract technology from Necron ruins without triggering defensive systems or catastrophic failures. It's still active. One of Harmony's engineers, a man named Wren, who'd lost his left arm to a Necron trap 20 years ago, observed, his scanning equipment painting the wreckage in thermal overlays. See those power conduits? They're trying to reroute energy to repair systems. If we're going to salvage anything useful, we need to move fast. Within 12 hours, the barge's automated systems will have restored enough functionality to be dangerous. What are we looking for? Jerome asked, already planning approach vectors and extraction routes. Power cores, Wren replied, highlighting several sections of the wreckage. The barge used something called a singularity reactor, a contained quantum black hole that generates effectively infinite energy. If we could extract one intact, it could power the Infinity for centuries. The problem is, they're unstable when damaged. Approach them wrong, and you create an actual black hole that devours everything within a kilometer radius. So, no pressure, Jerome said dryly. We also want their phase shift generators, Wren continued. The technology that lets them become intangible. If we could reverse engineer even a crude version, it would revolutionize our defensive capabilities and their resurrection matrix, the system that brings destroyed warriors back. That's quantum entanglement on a scale we can barely comprehend. Understanding it could unlock new forms of communication, computing, maybe even consciousness transfer. And the weapons? Chief asked. Gauss technology strips matter at the molecular level, Wren said. But it's biologically keyed to Necron systems. A human trying to fire one would just disintegrate. However, the targeting systems, the focusing crystals, the power regulation subsystems, those might be adaptable. We won't be firing Gauss beams, but we might be able to integrate components into our existing weapons to make them more effective. Chief nodded, surveying his team. We go in 3 groups. Alpha team, that's me and 4 engineers. We go for the power cores. Beta team, Jerome and 5 engineers. You extract phase shift generators and any intact control systems. Gamma team, the rest of Harmony's specialists. You focus on smaller components. Weapons, sensors, anything portable. We have 6 hours before the Spirit of Fire repositions for orbital bombardment of this site. Whatever we can't extract by then gets turned to glass. Questions? Just one of the UNSC engineers said. A young woman named Lieutenant Chen. What do we do if we find Necrons? The Lord who commanded this barge, he survived the crash. He could still be in there. If you encounter active Necrons, you don't engage, Chief said flatly. You call for Spartan support, you retreat to minimum safe distance, and you let us handle it. This is a salvage operation, not a combat mission. We're here to steal their technology, not fight their warriors. Clear? Affirmatives all around. Then let's move. They descended into the crater, the desert sand giving way to twisted metal and exposed machinery. The deeper they went, the more alien everything became. Necron architecture didn't follow human design principles. There were no right angles, no load-bearing structures in recognizable configurations. Everything flowed, curved, existed in states that seemed to shift between solid and energy depending on observation. Chief's motion tracker showed no contacts, but that meant nothing with Necrons. They could phase in and out of detection, materialize from nowhere, or simply remain dormant until specific conditions triggered their activation. Every step deeper into the wreckage was a gamble. Alpha Team reached the reactor chamber 30 minutes into the operation. It was a sphere of condensed space-time, held in stasis by pylons of living metal that pulsed with mathematical harmonics. Looking at it hurt. Not physically, but conceptually. Chief's mind struggled to process what his eyes were seeing, the way the reactors seemed to be both impossibly small and infinitely large simultaneously. "That's it," one of the engineers breathed, his scanning equipment going haywire. A quantum singularity, contained, controlled, harvested for power. If we could extract this intact. "Can we?" Chief asked, cutting through the wonder. The engineer ran calculations, cross-referenced data, and slowly nodded. "Maybe. We'd need to install portable stasis generators around it, creating a secondary containment field. Then we very carefully disconnect it from the barge's power distribution network. The moment we do, it'll try to collapse. We'll have exactly 90 seconds to get the secondary containment active, or the singularity escapes and we all die." "How certain are you about that 90-second window?" "About 70% certain," the engineer admitted. "Give or take 20 seconds. Chief did the math. 90 seconds to carry a portable singularity reactor out of a collapsed alien war barge while its automated systems tried to stop them. The margin for error was microscopic. "Do it," Chief ordered. "But I'm carrying the reactor. If something goes wrong, I want the fastest person in the best armor holding it." Across the wreckage, Beta Team was having their own challenges. Jerome stood before a control panel covered in Necron hieroglyphs that seemed to rearrange themselves when not directly observed. Beside him, Harmony engineers were arguing about the correct sequence to activate the phase shift generator without triggering defensive systems. "It's not about the sequence," one engineer insisted. "It's about the harmonics. See these glyphs? They're not just writing, they're crystallized sound. You have to sing the activation code." "Sing it?" Jerome asked. "The Necrons were organic once," the engineer explained, "before they transferred their consciousness into machines. Some of their technology still responds to organic input, voice, touch, thought. If we can match the harmonic frequency..." A sound cut through the discussion, a grinding, scraping noise that every UNSC soldier had learned to recognize. Movement, something massive, pulling itself through collapsed corridors. "Contact," Jerome called out, his assault rifle up. "All teams, we've got activity. Something's moving in the lower decks." Through the gaps in the twisted metal, they saw it emerge. The Necron Lord, his ornate armor cracked and scorched, half his face torn away, revealing the metal skull beneath, dragging himself forward on arms that sparked and sputtered. He'd survived the fall. He'd survived being buried under tons of wreckage. And now, he saw the organic vermin pillaging his command barge. When he spoke, his voice was the death rattle of civilizations, translated by damaged systems into grinding Gothic. "You, dare, my ship, my warriors. You will suffer. Eternal." He raised his staff, the skull-topped weapon somehow still functional despite everything. Green lightning began to gather. "Everyone down!" Jerome shouted, and dove behind a support beam as the lightning discharged. It struck where he'd been standing, and the metal simply ceased to exist, unraveled at the quantum level. "Spartans, engage." Chief's voice came through the tactical net. "All other teams, continue salvage operations. We handle the Lord." Chief and Jerome moved as one. Decades of training creating perfect coordination despite coming from different eras. They flanked the Lord from opposite sides, assault rifles firing in controlled bursts. The Lord's damaged armor couldn't maintain its stasis field. Rounds penetrated, sparked off internal systems, caused him to stagger. But he didn't fall. He turned, impossibly fast for something so damaged, and his staff caught Jerome across the chest. The Spartan flew backward, his shields flaring and dying, his armor cracked. He hit a wall and didn't get up immediately. Chief charged, covering the distance in 3 bounds. His combat knife, upgraded with a Forerunner energy blade, met the Lord's staff in a clash of technologies separated by millions of years. They fought in silence, except for the grinding of damaged servos and the hiss of energy discharge. The Lord was stronger, more durable, backed by technology that had conquered galaxies. But Chief was faster, more adaptive, and absolutely refused to accept defeat. He found an opening, a gap in the Lord's defense where his damaged armor had failed to regenerate. Chief's knife plunged into the crack, the energy blade cutting deep into Necron's systems. The Lord screamed, a sound that was equal parts machine malfunction and organic agony remembered across millions of years. Chief twisted the blade, then pulled it free and struck again, and again, and again. Each blow targeted critical systems identified by his armor's tactical computer. Power conduits, neural processors, resurrection protocols. The Lord fell to his knees, green ichor spraying from a dozen wounds. His eyes, those ancient, terrible eyes, fixed on Chief with something that might have been respect, or might have been hatred, or might have been both. "You are warrior," the Lord rasped. "Not vermin, warrior, but still, you will fall. The infinite empire rises again." He collapsed, his systems finally failing catastrophically. But he didn't phase out, didn't resurrect. Chief had destroyed his connection to the resurrection matrix. For the first time in perhaps millions of years, a Necron Lord had died permanently. "Jerome, status?" Chief called out. "Alive," Jerome groaned, pulling himself upright. "Armor's shot to hell, ribs might be cracked, but I'm mobile. Did we just kill a Necron Lord?" "Looks like it," Chief replied, studying the corpse. Already, it was beginning to decay, the living metal breaking down without the quantum entanglement to sustain it. Within hours, it would be nothing but dust. "Get back to your team. Finish the salvage. I need to extract this reactor before time runs out." Back in the reactor chamber, the engineers had installed the portable stasis generators. They were crude things, cobbled together from UNSC equipment and Harmony technology, held together with prayers and duct tape. They'd either work or create a localized black hole. No middle ground. "Ready?" the lead engineer asked Chief. "Do it." The engineer cut the connections to the barge's power distribution. Immediately, the reactor began to collapse, its carefully maintained quantum state becoming unstable. Chief grabbed the portable containment unit, 100 kilograms of equipment that would contain an infinite mass, and ran. His armor's systems screamed warnings. The singularity was destabilizing. 70 seconds, 60, 50. He burst from the wreckage, sand spraying under his boots. Behind him, reality began to twist, light bending toward a point that was becoming too dense, too massive. 40 seconds. The portable stasis generators activated, their field enveloping the containment unit. The collapse slowed, stabilized, held. The singularity was contained. "Package secure," Chief reported, allowing himself one breath of relief. "All teams, status report." "Beta team successful," Jerome confirmed. "We've got 3 phase shift generators, mostly intact, plus a crate of smaller components. Gamma team has collected weapons, sensors, and some kind of data core," another team leader reported. "Not sure what's on it, but it's still powered." "Good work, everyone out. Spirit of Fire, you're clear for bombardment in 5 minutes." They evacuated the crater as one, a procession of humans carrying the technological treasures of an empire 60 million years old. Behind them, the command barge's remains continued their futile self-repair, unaware that in moments they would cease to exist. The Spirit of Fire's lance batteries painted the desert in fire from orbit. The command barge, the crater, everything within a kilometer radius was reduced to molten glass. Any remaining Necron systems were destroyed, any survivors eliminated, any hope of resurrection denied. It was the only mercy the 41st millennium offered. Total annihilation was better than eternal servitude to ancient, terrible gods. Aboard the Infinity, Lasky watched the bombardment and then turned to Professor Anders. "Tell me we got something useful." "We got everything useful," Anders replied, barely containing her excitement. "The power core alone could revolutionize our energy generation. The phase shift technology, if we can adapt it, would make our shields orders of magnitude more effective. And the data core. Chief found a data core from the Lord's personal systems. It might contain tactical information, historical data, maybe even intelligence on other tomb worlds in the region. How long to analyze it? Days for preliminary assessment. Weeks for full translation. The Necrons don't think like us, Captain. Their technology is as much art as science. But with Harmony's help and our resources..." She paused. "We might actually have a chance." A chance. Not certainty. Not even probability. Just a chance. In the 41st millennium, that was all anyone could ask for. But as the celebrations began, as engineers marveled at their prizes and soldiers finally allowed themselves to hope, long-range sensors detected a new signal. 40 Imperial warships had just translated from the warp at the system's edge. Admiral Vhane had arrived, and he was broadcasting on all frequencies. "Heretical Vessel Infinity, this is Imperial justice. You have violated the sacred laws of the God Emperor. You have consorted with Xenos. You have employed abominable intelligence. Your crimes are beyond redemption. Surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Resist, and you will be destroyed, along with every soul aboard your corrupted vessel. You have 1 hour to respond. The Emperor's mercy is finite. His wrath is eternal." The clock had run out. The final battle for the UNSC's survival was about to begin. The Infinity's bridge had become the nerve center of an impossible last stand. Holographic displays showed the tactical nightmare they faced. Admiral Vhane's 40 Imperial warships forming a battle line at the system's edge. The 3 Necron tomb ships maintaining their silent blockade closer in, and Harmony 7 below, where 5 million civilians huddled in bunkers waiting to learn if they would see tomorrow. Captain Thomas Lasky stood at the center of it all, watching the countdown timer. 53 minutes until Vhane's ultimatum expired. 53 minutes to decide whether the UNSC would survive as free people or die as martyrs to an idea that the 41st millennium had long since abandoned. "Status of all systems," Lasky ordered, his voice steady despite knowing what was coming. "Slip space drive still non-functional," Commander Bradley reported. "The salvaged Necron power core is online and integrated, but adapting it to our propulsion systems would take weeks we don't have. However, ship power is now at 140% normal capacity. Shields, weapons, and engines are all running hot." "Phase shift generators?" Lasky asked. "Prototype installed on forward shields," Professor Anders replied from her station. "It's crude, untested, and might explode if we push it too hard. But preliminary tests show it can briefly render shield sections intangible. Could give us an edge against Imperial weapons fire." "Ground forces?" "Necron warriors on the surface are scattered but still fighting. Palmer reported, her armor now fully repaired after the command barge assault. Harmony's forces are holding, but they're exhausted. If the Imperials land troops to liberate the colony from our heretical influence, we won't be able to stop them. Lasky turned to Captain Cutter's hololink. Spirit of fire status? Combat ready, Cutter replied. We're not going to win a straight fight against 40 Imperial vessels, but we can make them pay for every meter. My crew is ready to do their duty, whatever that duty requires. Master Chief stood near the command chair, his presence a silent reminder that some things in this universe still refuse to accept impossible odds. Beside him, Spartan Jerome and the other recovered Spirit of Fire personnel formed a wall of green armor, living monuments to the idea that humanity could be more than the Imperium had made it. Captain, the communications officer called out. Admiral Vhane is hailing us again, directly this time. He's demanding to speak with you personally. Put him through, Lasky said. Let's see if there's any humanity left in the Imperium's crusaders. Admiral Vhane's face filled the main screen, and Lasky was struck by how old he looked, not physically, but spiritually. Centuries of service had carved lines of duty and dogma into features that might once have held compassion. His eyes held the certainty of a man who'd never questioned his purpose, because questioning led to doubt, and doubt led to damnation. Captain Lasky, Vhane began, his voice formal, almost regretful. I take no pleasure in this. Your vessel is a marvel. Your crew has proven their courage against Xenos threats. In another age, you would have been heroes of the Imperium, but you have made choices that cannot be forgiven. Consorting with the Tau, employing abominable intelligence, refusing rightful Imperial authority. These are heresies that damn entire worlds. And what about saving 5 million lives? Lasky challenged. What about standing against Necron harvesting? What about refusing to become the monsters you've become? Do those count for nothing? Noble sentiments, Vhane acknowledged. But the path to damnation is paved with noble intentions. The Imperium cannot permit independent human factions. That way lies the age of strife, the collapse that nearly destroyed our species. Unity under the Emperor's guidance is the only path to survival. Your independence, however well-intentioned, threatens that unity. So you'd rather kill us than let us live free? I would rather you lived, Vhane said. And for a moment, something almost human flickered in his eyes. Surrender. Submit to Imperial authority. Your technology will be sanctified by the Mechanicus. Your crew will be evaluated for taint, and those found pure will serve in the Imperial military. Your Spartans would make excellent candidates for Astartes enhancement. It's not extinction, Captain. It's assimilation into something greater than yourself. It's slavery, Lasky replied quietly, wrapped in religious justification and called salvation. We've seen what the Imperium does to people, Admiral. The servitors, the penal legions, the way you treat human life as a resource to be expended. That's not what we are. That's not what we'll become. Bob's expression hardened. Then you choose death. I am sorry for that. But the Emperor's will be done. He paused, then added, You have 30 minutes remaining. Use them to make peace with whatever gods you believe in, if such gods even exist outside the Emperor's light. The transmission cut. Silence fell across the bridge. Everyone knew what those 30 minutes meant. The Imperial fleet would advance. Macro cannons would fire. Lance batteries would carve through shields and hull. And the Infinity, for all its advanced technology, would die under the weight of 40 warships designed for planetary bombardment. Unless, Captain, Professor Anders said suddenly, pulling up new data. The Necron data core we recovered. I've been running decryption protocols on it during the standoff. I think I found something. A command protocol. Instructions for awakening tomb complexes across the region. Why would we want to wake up more Necrons? Bradley asked. We wouldn't, Anders replied. But the Imperials don't know that. And more importantly, the protocol includes override codes, ways to temporarily command dormant Necron forces before their overlords fully awaken and reassert control. Chief understood immediately. You want to use the Necrons as a weapon against the Imperials. Not just against the Imperials, Anders clarified. Against both threats. We broadcast the awakening command across the system. Every tomb complex receives it. The Ice Sheet Overlord, who's already awake, responds. The 3 blockade ships respond. And the Imperials, seeing a massive Necron emergence, are forced to choose. Do they continue attacking us? Or do they deal with the Xenos threat? That's insane, Palmer said. We'd be unleashing an army of ancient killing machines we can't control. We're already dead if we don't, Chief countered. This way, we die having tried everything. Or we survive because the Necrons and Imperials destroy each other while we slip away in the chaos. And Harmony? Cutter asked quietly. The 5 million people below? If we wake the tombs, they'll be harvested. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of command, the burden of impossible choices, the knowledge that every path led through blood and horror. Lasky looked at the tactical display, looked at the Imperial fleet advancing, looked at Harmony 7, where the Magister Voss and her people had trusted the UNSC to protect them. We don't use the codes, Lasky said finally. We're not sacrificing 5 million people to save ourselves. That's exactly the kind of calculus the Imperium uses. And if we embrace it, we become what we're fighting against. Then what do? Bradley asked. Lasky straightened, decision crystallizing with the clarity that came from accepting the worst. We fight. Both of them. The Imperials and the Necrons both. We hit the blockade ships with everything we've got. Necron power core at maximum, phase shift shields, coordinated fire from both the Infinity and Spirit of Fire. We break through. We evacuate as many Harmony civilians as our holds can carry, and we run into the deep gulf. Find another lost colony. Start again. Keep fighting until there's no fight left in us. Captain, the math... Bradley began. Damn the math, Lasky interrupted. The UNSC has never won by math. We've won by refusing to accept defeat even when defeat was certain. By fighting for what's right, even when what's right had no chance of winning. That's what made us different from the Covenant. That's what makes us different from the Imperium. And that's what we're going to prove right now. He activated the ship-wide channel. All hands, this is Captain Lasky. In 5 minutes, we're going to do something that looks a lot like suicide. We're going to take on an Imperial fleet and a Necron blockade simultaneously while evacuating civilians from a planet under siege. The odds are impossible. The chances of success are negligible. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Because we're the UNSC. We're the people who beat the Covenant when the Covenant couldn't be beaten. We're the people who survived being thrown 38,000 years into the future and found a way to matter. And we're the people who are about to show this dark millennium that humanity can be more than the Imperium made it. Battle stations. And let's make this count. The crew responded not with fearful silence, but with defiant cheers that echoed through every deck. They were going to die. They all knew it. But they were going to die as free people, fighting for something that mattered, standing for principles that the 41st millennium had forgotten. All ships, execute attack pattern Lasky 1, the captain ordered. Phase shift shields to maximum. Mac cannons charged. Target the nearest Necron blockade ship. Hit it with everything we have, punch through the formation, and don't stop for anything. The Infinity and Spirit of Fire surged forward, their engines burning at maximum thrust. Behind them, the Imperial fleet began its pursuit, macro cannons already firing at extreme range. And ahead, the 3 Necron tomb ships activated, their Gauss weaponry charging, their ancient minds calculating the best way to destroy the organic vermin that dared challenge the infinite empire. Master Chief stood on the bridge, watching it all unfold, and felt something he hadn't felt in 6 months. Certainty. Not certainty of victory, not even certainty of survival, but certainty that they were doing the right thing, regardless of the cost. The first Mac round struck the Necron vessel, and the phase shift shields flickered, partially phasing the ship out of normal space for critical seconds. Imperial lance fire passed through empty space where the Infinity should have been. And in that moment of impossible physics and desperate engineering, the UNSC fleet punched through the blockade like a spear through paper. "We're through," Bradley shouted, setting course for Harmony orbital space, preparing for emergency evacuation procedures. Behind them, the Imperial fleet followed, and the Necron vessels turned to give chase. And on Harmony 7, alarms sounded as Pelicans and every available transport began racing toward the surface to collect as many people as could possibly fit. They wouldn't save them all. They'd be lucky to save half. But half was infinitely better than none. The Battle of Harmony 7 raged for 6 hours. The Infinity and Spirit of Fire fought a running battle against overwhelming odds, their Necron-enhanced systems keeping them alive against weapons that should have torn them apart. Harmony's people evacuated in desperate waves, leaving behind homes and history and everything they'd built over 3 millennia. And in the chaos, something unexpected happened. The Necron blockade ships, seeing the Imperial fleet entering their territory, made a choice. They stopped pursuing the UNSC vessels and turned to face the greater threat, the Imperium's Crusade fleet, which represented not just an immediate danger, but a long-term challenge to their claim over the Ghoul stars. Ancient enemies met in the void, and the universe burned. Admiral Vhane, seeing the Necron threat, was forced to divide his attention. And in that division, in that moment of hesitation between destroying heretics and fighting Xenos, the UNSC found their opening. The Infinity and Spirit of Fire, holds packed with 3 million refugees and combat effectiveness degraded to 40%, jumped into the unknown. Not back to Tau space, not toward the Imperium, but deeper into the Ghoul stars, toward coordinates discovered in the Necron data core. Coordinates that suggested another cluster of lost human colonies, another chance to build something that mattered. Behind them, Harmony 7 burned. The Imperials and Necrons fought over the corpse of a world that had survived 3,000 years in hiding, only to be destroyed by the collision of empires. 2 million people who couldn't be evacuated died in the crossfire, their names added to the infinite list of casualties in the 41st millennium's endless wars. But 3 million lived. 3 million people who would have been servitors or corpse starch or Necron harvest got to see another day. 3 million souls who knew that the UNSC, that impossible, stubborn, foolish organization from a better age, had chosen to save them instead of save themselves. 6 weeks later, deep in the Ghoul stars, the refugee fleet, now consisting of the Infinity, the Spirit of Fire, and 24 civilian transports salvaged from Harmony, found it. A cluster of 7 systems, all showing signs of human habitation, all isolated from the Imperium and Tau both. Lost colonies that had survived the age of strife by being too far away, too unimportant, too deep in the darkness to be worth conquering. But they weren't alone anymore. Captain Lasky stood on the observation deck, watching the stars of the first system they'd entered. Below, a planet called New Harmony showed signs of industrial civilization. Not advanced, not powerful, but alive and human and free. Master Chief joined him, his armor showing new scars from the Battle of Harmony 7. "We're calling it the Haven Cluster," Lasky said quietly. 7 systems, maybe 50 million people total across all of them. None of them know the Imperium exists. None of them have been crushed under the weight of religious tyranny. They're what humanity looked like before it forgot how to hope. "Can we protect them?" Chief asked. "I don't know," Lasky admitted. "We've got 2 damaged capital ships, 3 million refugees, and technology we barely understand cobbled together from Necron salvage. The Imperium will eventually find us. The Necrons might wake up in nearby tomb worlds, and we're running on borrowed time and salvaged equipment." He turned to face Chief directly. "But we're going to try, because that's what the UNSC does. We try when trying is all we have left. We fight when fighting seems pointless. We hope when hope is the most irrational thing in the universe. That's very human of us," Chief observed. "Yeah," Lasky agreed. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe in a galaxy full of empires that forgot what it means to be human, our job is to remember, to be the stubborn, irrational, hope against hope humans that the 41st millennium thinks went extinct." Captain Cutter approached, datapad in hand. "We've made contact with New Harmony's government. They're cautiously welcoming. Apparently, we're the first outsiders they've seen in 5,000 years. They want to know if we're here to conquer them." "Tell them we're here to defend them," Lasky said, "and to ask for help. We need resources, shipyard facilities, and a place to rebuild. In exchange, we offer protection, advanced technology where appropriate, and a chance to be part of something bigger than isolated survival. An alliance of free human worlds," Cutter said slowly, "independent of the Imperium, free of chaos, unbound by the greater good. It's ambitious, probably impossible. Everything we've done for the past 6 months has been impossible," Lasky replied. "But we're still here." Chief looked out at the stars of the Haven Cluster, thinking about all they'd lost to get here. Roland, the 93 casualties from the Orc battle, the 4 soldiers lost in the Ice Sheet tomb, the 2 million people they couldn't save from Harmony 7. The weight of all those names, all those faces, all those lives spent in the desperate pursuit of survival with dignity. In the 41st millennium, there is only war, Chief said quietly, repeating the phrase they'd heard so many times since arriving in this nightmare future. "Maybe," Lasky agreed. "But there's also us. And as long as we're here, as long as we remember what humanity was supposed to be, war isn't the only thing. It's not even the most important thing." He activated his comm, broadcasting to both ships and all the transports in their fleet. "All hands, all refugees, all survivors of the Battle of Harmony 7. This is Captain Lasky. We've lost people. We've lost worlds. We've lost things we can never get back. But we're still here, still human, still free. And we're about to do something this galaxy hasn't seen in 10,000 years. We're going to build a nation, small, vulnerable, probably doomed, but a nation that believes people matter more than empires, that freedom is worth dying for, and that hope isn't a weakness. Welcome to the Haven Cluster, Welcome to humanity's second chance. Let's try not to waste it. The transmission ended, and across the fleet, 17,000 UNSC personnel and 3 million refugees looked toward the future with something the 41st millennium had long since abandoned. Hope. It wouldn't last. The Imperium would eventually come. The Necrons would eventually wake. Chaos, orcs, tyranids. All the horrors of this dark millennium would find them eventually. But for now, in this moment, in this cluster of forgotten stars, humanity was free. And the UNSC, battered, depleted, running on salvage technology and stubborn determination, stood ready to defend that freedom for as long as they could hold a weapon. Spartans never died. They were just missing in action. And the 41st millennium was about to learn what that really meant.